The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Bob Ney's book, Sideswiped, Lessons Learned Courtesy of the Hitmen of Capitol Hill. Bob was the only member of Congress. He was a Republican congressman. In fact, he was the guy who invented the phrase freedom fries. That far right, yes. He was the only member of Congress who spoke Farsi, which is the language they speak in Iran. The Iranian government, during the Bush administration, George W. Bush, sent a letter to, or delivered a letter to Bob in Farsi, because he spoke Farsi, saying that they were willing to recognize Israel and stop their nuclear program in exchange for recognition by the United States. Bob delivered that to the Bush White House, and within a short time, Bob found himself in a federal prison. And that letter never surfaced, and that rapprochement never happened. It's an amazing story. It's too long to read as an excerpt, but it's in the book. And, that was the end of Bob's political career. Now he's working for Talk Media News. But this is from chapter 17 of his book. It's titled Political Strong-Arming. I had a major blowout over the Head Start program with Andy Card, President George W. Bush's chief of staff. The first of the legislation debates centered on Head Start. John Boehner was doing his best to acquire votes to hurt the program. I had supported Head Start for years as an Ohio State senator and again as a U.S. congressman. When George Bush became president, however, every issue, including this one, was treated as though, if lost, it would be the end of the world, as if winning were vital to save the presidency. Speaker Hastert became a lapdog for President Bush. Didn't matter whether it was overspending, crushing unions, or ripping the legs out from under Head Start. Hastert acted like the president ran the House instead of the other way around. I found myself under intense pressure to vote against Head Start. I was bombarded by all sides, Tom DeLay, Hastert's staff, and the chairman of the Education Committee, which at the time was John Boehner. I found it amazing that a sitting president would make a do-or-die issue over taking money away from poor children who needed a jump on school, a Head Start. Anyone in the field of education knew that Head Start had a rocky beginning, but it had proven to be statistically and socially a very fine program, and I had always supported it. I had a private hideaway, an office the Speaker gives to leaders and long-term older members of Congress that very few people knew about. Even Brian Walsh, my press secretary, was unaware. On this particular evening, I was in that Capitol hideaway, one floor directly below the chamber. I was sick and tired of being lobbied and bullied on this vote. I had to escape the arm twisting. I used to say it was so bad that you could hear the bones snap on the floor of the House. My private phone in the hideaway was ringing, so I knew that only Ted Vander Meade of the Speaker's office could have given it out. Chris Kruger, my executive assistant, answered it and signaled me that it was Andy Card, the White House chief of staff. Andy said, "We need this Head Start vote. It's critical to the Bush administration's future." I was stunned at this. The entire future of the Bush administration was predicated on beating up on little unfortunate kids by taking away their Head Start funding. I thought this was idiocy and stupid politics. I said, I have always supported Head Start over my entire career. I don't like this vote, and I just cannot help you. Card blew up at me and responded with, "Let me make this clear. Boehner said you were a vote for us, and we are holding you to that." I don't know where Boehner got that from, I said. I can rethink this, but I don't like it, and I'm sure I will not change my mind. Andy then said, "You are an effing liar," only he spells out the word. And I said, "F you, Andy, and your idiotic administration." And I hung up on him. I went to the floor of the House where Boehner confronted me. I told him, Andy is disrespectful, way out in left field on this. He can kiss my ass and F him, period. Boehner continued to strong-arm me. They were one vote short. It boiled down to the fact that this vote was so hideous, so wrong, that they simply could not get the votes. One of my best friends in Congress, Steve LaTourette, took a bullet for me on this to move the bill along. He told him to back off on me and he would help through the process in the House, but not necessarily if or when the vote came back from the Senate. Second time Andy Card ran afoul of Congress, he had to confront Congressman Steve LaTourette. Steve was one of the finest members of Congress, very brave in his positions, an independent thinker, good at politics, and no wallflower. He's conservative on some issues, but he cares deep down about working people and how they survive in America. At this writing, Steve has left Congress, frustrated with the lack of acceptance of moderates within the Republican Party. Andy Card decided that he wanted to remove Davis-Bacon, a federal law that requires payment of prevailing wages to workers on public works projects, from the Transportation Appropriation Bill. Don Young was a strong transportation chairman and let LaTourette take the lead on the issue. I dug into Andy's history and found some interesting things. He'd been a Massachusetts state rep. He'd worked for President Bush's father, Bush 41. When Bush 41 lost to Clinton, Andy felt that the transportation bill had done the president no good, and he disliked labor unions, and he disliked unions in general. We all kept up a tough front. Transportation unions lobbyist for the building trades, like Tim James, was very effective and helped the labor Republicans push back. Bush 43, though, kept putting up roadblocks at every step. He simply did not want a transportation bill that might support the unions. John Mica, Transportation Subcommittee Chair, during a private Republican caucus meeting, made the best statement of the day. John said, "Hell, the president doesn't think we need a bill. As he travels in cities by car, they stop all the traffic for his motorcade. He thinks there are no traffic problems. The streets are deserted." We all howled. So anyhow, there's just all these amazing inside stories about how Congress actually works. It's pretty grim. The book Sideswiped by Bob Ney.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
My friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And with us for our first hour on this Wednesday, First Hour Wednesday, is Congressman Mark Pocan, the first vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the the second district of the state of Wisconsin. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, R-E-P, as in representative, Rep Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K, P-O-C-A-N. And Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
It's always great to have you with us. So yesterday I was going off on this rant. I'm on the Congressional Progressive Caucus's mailing list. And I got this email yesterday, one day before, another one today, about the new budget that you guys just laid out. It's actually a good, solid budget. It's relatively non-controversial in terms of will it do what it says it'll do, as has been the case with all the previous Congressional Progressive Caucus budgets. And I challenged my listeners and viewers to see if any corporate media in America picked up the story, because you guys held a big press conference yesterday. I've seen no evidence that any did, but you're more in the middle of it. But broadly speaking, you know, there was a bunch of you. I mean, a bunch of members of Congress. If 10 Republican Tea Partiers from the House of Representatives had gotten together and offered a budget, anything as comprehensive as this, or even something 1/10 as comprehensive as this, every single network would be falling all over themselves to cover it. There seems to be just this massive bias by the corporate media for corporate-owned Republicans, and this just boggles my mind. But anyhow, that's my rant. Feel free to address it if you'd like, but mostly, you know, tell us about the people's budget.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom. You're right. While we had some media there, it wasn't the corporate media that covered it. We had, I bet you, a dozen members of Congress, 10 or 12 different groups that are supporting it out of the 60 plus that are endorsing the people's budget. We had people from Randy Weingarten from AFT. We had people from Planned Parenthood and NARAL. We had people from the Economic Policy Institute that help us write it and do all the number crunching on it. And this is a big document, so this is as much as we talk about fighting the bad things, and I know we'll talk about it the next hour, like healthcare and other things that the Republicans are putting forward. This is our alternative to not just say no to things, but put something positive forward. And in this case, this is a budget that invests $2 trillion in infrastructure, something that we haven't seen any other plan that goes that extensively in fixing our roads and bridges and schools and broadband and water delivery systems and everything else across the country. We changed the tax code significantly, making it more fair for the middle class and those aspiring to be in the middle class. We invest $1 trillion in childcare, essentially a universal childcare proposal for the nation. We talk about college affordability and debt-free college and free college within the budget document. We make it so prescription drugs are more affordable, which is something also that I think people have really asked for. We provide a pathway to single payer for states to be able to do that, along with the Affordable Care Act. So we want to make sure the Affordable Care Act is strong, but make it even better by doing that. And we have comprehensive immigration proposals that actually make sense. We don't have a wall funding, but we do have a pathway to citizenship and a lot of other things that make a lot of sense for people. And we expand Social Security and things like that. That's all in one document, but it's really a lot of the things that we talk about every week on your show, Tom, in one big document showing people that there is an alternative. You don't have to have Paul Ryan and Donald Trump's policies, that if we can change things up a little bit, there is a real path forward that can work for working people in this country.
And how do you pay for all this?
There's a lot of different ways that we do it. A lot of it is getting rid of corporate tax breaks that currently exist. Some of it is a high-speed financial transaction fee. This is something they're doing in the European Union. We've put out there before, although we gave it a terrible name, the Robin Hood tax. I think that is a little confusing to people, but that's about $1.8 trillion. That almost alone pays for the infrastructure package investment that we have to create those good paying family supporting jobs. And we raise taxes on the wealthiest, and we make sure that everyone else is getting a little better break. So in the end, this is a plan that not only does all of these things, but if I remember right, in the previously, and in this year, we've yet to see the Republican budget, we also do more to help take care of things like the deficit that even the Republican proposals do, while putting positive ideas forward.
Yeah. How close is it to being a balanced budget?
I'd have to look at the exact numbers on it, where that's at, Tom. I don't have that answer at the tip of my tongue, but I'll get it during this program for you.
Okay, fine. What else is on your mind? You're in the midst of all the screwy stuff going on in Congress. Paul Ryan this morning tweeted out, finally, proof that the MacArthur Amendment, which lets the states stick people with all 131 million of us with pre-existing conditions into high-risk pools that the AARP says could cost up to $25,000 a year. Paul Ryan says, proof that we've covered pre-existing conditions. It's all wonderful. Vote for us. And apparently one of the Republicans, his name is escaping me right at the moment, but
Upton.
I'm sorry?
Fred Upton.
Fred Upton, yeah, thank you, for Michigan. Fred Upton had said, no way, I'm not going to vote for this. And now they're saying, okay, well, let's toss in $8 billion to subsidize the high-risk pools, which is really just a variation on what Obamacare is doing, except Obamacare doesn't jump through the hoop of the high-risk pools. It's like they keep getting closer and closer to Obamacare, but they just keep trying to figure out ways to skim more and more money off the top for their bankster buddies. Anyhow, so what's going on in Congress this week?
Yeah, a lot. And what you said is all correct. So this is such an inside the beltway town that we forget that there's, the rest of the country around us sometimes. And this is classic inside the beltway Republican thinking on this budget proposal. So here's my theory, Tom. Because we're going to pass an omnibus today that basically doesn't do anything that Donald Trump wanted it to do and that the Republicans wanted to, and we've got year-round Pell Grants in there. We've added $2 billion for NIH. We did all these other really decent things, and we're not in charge. I think they realized in order to get that done, to keep government open until September 30th, since the Tea Party will never vote for anything, they needed to come and get our votes. We got a pretty good deal for considering everything that's out there, that they needed something for their base, and they absolutely had to get this health care bill done. And Paul Ryan is desperate because he looked so pathetic when it failed last time. So I think when Fred Upton and others, they didn't have the votes earlier this week, even with the MacArthur Amendment that allowed states to basically say if you have pre-existing conditions, you don't have to offer it if state doesn't want to. You don't have to include that in coverage or other essential health benefits. But now this high-risk pool, which Paul should know better because in Wisconsin it didn't work well. It's very, very expensive. To say you're going to have a little money for that, exactly, that's the whole idea. If the Affordable Care Act made sure that 20 million people who didn't have access to health insurance now had it, and now we're realizing that's a little bit costly because not the healthy people didn't sign up. Their answer is like a pathetic response because it's got all the same problems, only intensified 100-fold by having high-risk pools that are going to be very, very expensive and just a couple nickels to help cover the people who may have to go there for insurance when you drop 20 or more million people from getting health insurance. So this is like a really, really bad idea. I think it's more about that big checking the box. We repealed Obamacare, but the policy itself is a convoluted, messy way that's going to kick a lot of people off of health insurance in this country.
Yeah, not a good thing. We're talking with Congressman Mark Pocan for the hour. He will be taking your call. I'm done. You know, I've asked my questions. Now it's your turn. If you have a question for Congressman Pocan, about anything, anything, how Congress works, his opinions on things, what the news of the day is, give us a call at 202-808-9925, and we'll be back with your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Your chance to ask one of the leading progressives in Congress. What's up? Right now, Congressman Mark Pocan with us right now. And welcome back. By the way, Congressman Pocan, yesterday I did a half-hour survey where I had people call and with a word and a sentence why, say who they think should be the Democratic nominee for president in 2020. And I think Elizabeth Warren got the most with 9 votes. Bernie got 7. This was out of maybe 60 altogether, something like that. But, several people mentioned your name, too. So it's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. Anyhow, Omar in Herndon, Virginia, you are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. Omar, what's up?
Yes, I would like to see Mrs. Pocan challenge Nancy Pelosi for the leadership in the House. And please do that for us. And my question is to you. There are certain things in the Obamacare that are non-negotiable, like the pre-existing. Are there anything that you guys can talk to them about, kind of like, okay, fine, we can let go of this part, we can let go of this part, so that way we can keep the original health care?
Yeah, Omar, if this were a place that was a reasonable place with reasonable people, absolutely. But this is not a reasonable place with reasonable people on the Republican side of the aisle. They don't really care about health care. They care about the tax cuts that they have in their bill. They care about checking a box. But yeah, there are a couple things that we really do need to do around the Affordable Care Act to make it so it continues to work. Part of it was when we found there were 20 million people who needed health insurance. That's why they signed up for it. A lot of the healthy people that help balance the costs out, that make the actuarials work, didn't sign up. We got to figure out a way to deal with that. And I think that is something that's a fair criticism. And one of the ways you could also deal with that is by having a public option, which we tried to do originally, but it didn't make it through the process when the bill was created, that would provide that competition so you can still have a place for people who need health care. And it would be a much better way of making sure that the plan works overall. But there are some things we can do that'll make sure everyone still has access to health insurance that you have at the Affordable Care Act, but would deal with the actuarial issues that are fair and valid that are out there. But that's fixing a plan, not throwing it all away, kicking 24 to 30 million people off of health insurance. And, really, this is more about part of their tax policy. They want to provide tax reform for their wealthiest and the corporate masters they have. And, I wish we could have a reasonable conversation. But again, they don't care about making sure constituents have health care.
Isn't that the thing that's really animating almost all of this, that there is a 3% Obamacare tax on investment income? Right now, investment income is typically taxed at a maximum 15% interest rate, capital gains rate, or maybe it's 20% now, the capital gains rate. And there's like this additional 3%. And so they're still not paying the 39% that all the rest of us who get a paycheck pay. But the billionaires are outraged that they have to pay 3% on their stock portfolios, on the profits on the stock portfolios, in order to support health care for some, average working Joe in Pennsylvania. God forbid It seems to me like that's like 90%, all the money, all the effort, all these ads from these outside groups, coming from the Kochs and the Mercers and all these other, the right-wing billionaires. Am I wrong in thinking that that's really what 95% of this is all about, and why Paul Ryan is so foaming at the mouth about it, that it's really about the donor class?
Absolutely, Tom, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. Stick around. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line with us, taking your calls. You can tweet him at Rep Mark Pocan. Send him a tweet saying thanks, for being on the show, if nothing else. Obviously better to speak to the issues, but good guy. Pocan.house.gov is his website. And Kevin, listening on KTRC 1260 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan. Kevin.
Thank you, Congressman Pocan, for taking my call.
Just give him a few years.
And for all the work that you're doing to support the progressive causes, and also the news that you bring us. This access is not what we're hearing on the corporate media. You seem to have answered the questions I had about what you would support in the Affordable Care Act. So I would ask you, is there any mechanism by which we might create our own CBO-style score on some of these Medicare for All or public option bills?
Isn't that also, just to add to Kevin's question, Congressman, isn't that essentially what, who's the anti-tax lobbyist here on K Street? Grover Norquist. Isn't that essentially what Grover Norquist did with regard to tax policy, as he created his own little scoring system inside his little, lobbying shop and turned it into a national thing?
Yeah, I think it's one of the many things that he's done, and he's effective. I've actually had personal conversations with him because we actually agree a little on prison reform. I think they look at it from a cost perspective. We look at it from a human perspective. But Kevin, one of the things we do in like the Progressive Caucus budget that we put out, we work with the Economic Policy Institute, but there are also other groups in Washington that do some of that. So we actually do get some assessments. The problem is the CBO. You have to have a bill going through to get that CBO score. And in some cases, it has to be structured in a certain way to get that dollar figure. But EPI, Economic Policy Institute, has done that with us on our budget. And that's why we have great numbers on it. And that's why the budget is so well respected. Last time we got a majority of the Democratic caucus to vote for the Progressive Caucus budget because we've done the homework. And then that's our framework for everything else we talk about through the session.
And then tragically, I don't think anybody who watches the corporate media, the mainstream media, even knows that the budget is there, much less that the majority of Democrats support it. It's just this is just a travesty.
One thing, Tom, that is, I think, positive is a lot of the ideas we put in there, we find a session or two later become mainstream Democratic Party ideas, including things like the financial transaction fee and debt-free college and some other ideas. So at least, even if we're not getting the attention on it, we are getting the attention that makes it become a reality in a bigger, broader way. Just it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, you just never know where the ripples are going to land when you drop that pebble in the water. Patrick in Los Angeles, listening on Sirius XM. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. Thanks for showing up on the position. You're great. I'm interested in the House bill that just passed that changes the overtime laws for people that changes them to comp pay instead of getting overtime pay from the employers.
Yeah, Patrick, so your question is great. So this week, the Republicans put forward a bill, and they made it sound like it's something to be friendly to employees, when in reality, of course, it's not. What it does is, instead of getting overtime pay for working overtime, it sets up a structure where you'd basically get comp time instead, which for some people is fine. And some people can negotiate that with an employer. But in general, for a lot of people, they need the overtime if they're going to work the extra hours and not be with their family and not able to take another job. And this is trying to do in lieu of additional pay, giving you time off. But honestly, if you're working a job and you need the money, that time off doesn't help you feed your family, and you can't take another job because you don't have predictable hours in this situation.
This is unpaid time off, right?
Right. That's your comp time is. So instead of getting that overtime pay that you should have accrued and got paid in your paycheck, instead you're trading it off for time off, comp time. But again, so you get a Friday off in the future. What are you going to go do? Sell your plasma in order to make some extra money? I mean, that's kind of the alternative with the plan they put out there. So it's really going after workers who have deserved overtime pay, as the law says, and provides a route to let employers get around from actually paying their responsibility.
Dave in Huffman Estates, Illinois, listening to WCPT. Dave, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. Are you familiar with H.R. 1419 that Congressman David Young of Iowa has proposed?
You'd have to tell me more about the name. There's thousands of bills introduced already.
Okay, it's to authorize the Cold War Victory Medal for all the vets who served during that time.
Oh, I'm not familiar with it offhand, Dave. No.
And because I understand there's only like about 7 co-signers so far, and I was just curious if you had co-signed or not with him, on that.
No, I'll look into it. HR 1419?
Correct.
Okay, I will look into it, Dave. I'm not familiar. Right now, there's probably, I'm guessing, we're over 2,000 bills introduced in the House just in the first few months. So, until something comes up, often the stuff that's under your committee's jurisdiction and things that may be getting some attention. But I don't know about this bill, Dave, but I'll look into it.
Okay, great. Jerry in Englewood, Colorado, listening to KABQ. Hey, Jerry, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yeah, hi, Tom. Hi, Congressman. Thanks you both for everything you do. Congressman, my question is, when the Democrats resume control of Congress, whenever that might be, can you see them at any point, or yourselves at any point, invoking the provision in the Constitution that allows you to regulate the Supreme Court, considering the current composition of the court?
That's Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, which says that the Supreme Court shall operate under regulations established by Congress.
Jerry, I can't say that there's been much discussion on that yet. I think, most of what we're focusing on is how do you get to that point that we can have the privilege of those great discussions of what we're going to do when we're in the majority. I think, it's been a long period since 2010 when we saw those devastating, sweep across the country because people didn't come out to vote. So, I think we can put just about everything on the table to look at when we take the majority. But until then, we're fighting the fight where we need to fight. We're putting the positive alternatives out there where we can. But I can't say there's been any discussion about that among members, at least widespread discussion.
It seems like that the main reason to do that would be to basically flip Citizens United. I mean, there has been legislation, it's called court stripping, in the past that says the court may not deal with this piece of legislation. The most recent one was one that Tom Daschle got passed when he was in the Senate that had a court stripping provision in it. It was an ag bill, actually. But denied the Supreme Court the ability to do that. But mainly, I think it would be used against Citizens United. It's an interesting conversation we'll have to have someday in more depth. We're talking with Congressman Mark Pocan. He is the first vice chair of the the Congressional Progressive Caucus, member of the House of Representatives representing Wisconsin's 2nd District, right next door to Paul Ryan. Pocan.house.gov is the website. His Twitter account, Rep. Mark Pocan.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And back with more of your calls for the Congressman right after this.
And welcome back to Thom Hartmann University, to our book club. We're reading today from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And this is from page 60. The chapter is Extinctions, Diversity Supports Survival. The consolidation of power and wealth in the hands of a very few rich individuals and multinational corporations has made some businessmen and politicians rich, but it's also aggregating and wiping out resources. We're directly competing with every other form of life on the planet. As long as there was more out there to exploit, growth was possible. Now, as we approach the closed limits of our planet's capacities to generate food and process our wastes, sustainable growth has to be re-examined for the oxymoron it is. And even if nature doesn't kill us off, it seems that we're bent on doing it ourselves, or to ourselves. Pesticide use in the United States is up over 3,000% since World War II, yet more pesticides doesn't mean fewer crops lost to insects. To the contrary, we're losing 20% more of our crops to insects than in 1945. But because of increasing insect resistance to pesticides and mechanized farming techniques, the pesticide industry has economically addicted many farmers to their product. Harmless species are disappearing, but no harmful insect species has been eradicated. But while the insects, who can evolve through hundreds to millions of generations during the period of a single human lifespan generation, are becoming immune to our pesticides, we are not. This leaves us vulnerable to the poisons that we ourselves manufacture to kill off another species. For example, in September 1997, the New York Times featured a story by reporter John H. Cushman Jr. titled, "Cancer in Kids Increases, New Toxins Suspected." The story chronicled how the rate of cancer among children in the United States has skyrocketed since the 1970s, when we were using far less than half of the agricultural chemicals we are now, to the point now where the odds are 1 in 600 of a child born today getting cancer before the age of 10. Childhood cancer has become the second leading cause of childhood death behind accidents, and is now the most common fatal childhood disease, accounting for fully 10% of all childhood deaths. Since 1973, for example, rates of acute lymphoblastic leukemia increased 27% in boys and girls, and brain cancer is up 40% over the same period. 99% of all U.S. mother's milk today contains detectable levels of DDT. In 1950, it was found that 0.5%, 0.5%, of U.S. male college students were infertile. In 1978, a study found that number had skyrocketed to 25%. And in the past 32 years, the average American male's sperm production has dropped by 30%. Some researchers attribute this to the accumulation of chlorinated hydrocarbon pesticides, which are often intended to render insects sterile, while others speculate that some plastics used in food packaging mimic the female hormone estrogen, and may be demasculizing men and increasing the risk of breast and uterine cancer in women. But that's just the beginning of the problem. In 1960, routine feeding of antibiotics to farm animals was virtually unknown. Antibiotic administration to meat animals has increased so much since then, however, that today over 55% of all antibiotics manufactured in the United States are put into animals or animal feed. This has turned our livestock into a vast breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant microorganisms. The American pharmaceutical and meat industries don't consider this a problem, nor do the politicians to whom they contribute millions of dollars a year, and continue to support the routine administration of these drugs to dairy and meat animals. But that stance is hardly supported by any common knowledge in science. The European Economic Community, the Common Market, has banned American meat products grown with antibiotics. Why? The research which so concerned the Europeans showed that in 1960, only 13% of American human staphylococcus infections were resistant to penicillin. By 1988, however, the number of penicillin-resistant staph infections in Americans had exploded to over 90%. Muppets creator Jim Henson was killed by such a drug-resistant infection, for example, despite his substantial wealth and his access to the most sophisticated and expensive healthcare system in the world. And it's not just on land. Ocean studies specialist James W. Porter of the University of Georgia points to the explosion of human viruses and bacteria filling the water of the planet's oceans, killing off coral reefs and spreading disease among humans and other life forms. He projects that 20 to 30% of coral reefs are at risk, with a 446% increase in infections just since 1996 among the reefs he has been monitoring off the Florida coast. University of South Florida researcher Joan B. Rose points out that between 20 and 24% of all people swimming in Florida's coastal beaches become infected with viruses, which can cause heart disease, ear infections, sore throats and eyes, meningitis, gastrointestinal disease, hepatitis, and diabetes. About 1%, she says, become chronically infected. Similarly, a sampling of shellfish from New York waters found over 40% infected with human pathogens. And a sampling of water from the Waikiki Beach in Hawaii found that more than a third of the samples tested were infected
with human viruses. At the same time, Vermont ice cream manufacturer Ben & Jerry's is suing the government. They want to put on the label of their ice cream that the milk they use is from cows free of synthetic growth hormones, and it continues with that sort of story. So this is just, one piece of the last hours of Ancient Sunlight. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can support the Thom Hartmann Program and see video of our entire 3-hour show over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us, Congressman Mark Pocan. Pocan.house.gov, the website. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. And Congressman, you're still with us, right?
I am.
There you are. Okay. Patricia in Portage, Wisconsin. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thank you both for being a voice of sanity in these crazy times. And I write the Mad Raven Speak wildlife column for the Capital Times the past 6 years. And I don't see any awareness of the urgency of biodiversity destruction except from the Vatican, who met on it, and nothing in our so-called leadership. And I am concerned about, step by step with wolves being returned to the states, if that is part of the legislation that is going forward in this week of activity on the Hill. And, I just want to say that I live in the country in Wisconsin, and I experienced the changes in the past 15 years. And when you destroy natural predators down to barely nothing like we're doing, you get disease. So Wisconsin is epidemic with Lyme disease because of an explosion of mice and deer. We have all these diseases coming up, and it is expensive and harmful, and I have Lyme disease from it, from living in the country where they destroyed our coyotes. And, I just think we have to stop this juggernaut of destroying non-human life, and I wonder if you know what's going to happen to our wolves.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, Patricia, so let me, if I can, just take it a little bit higher up, because I think this might be a little broader for all the listeners around the country. So one of the things that we saw is this real big attack on Environmental Protection Agency. The Trump 2018 budget proposes a 31% cut overall, and many programs cut completely within the EPA. I think that's where a lot of our attention needs to focus, is on protecting those programs around clean air and clean water and protecting our biodiversity that right now are really going to be gutted under Republican attempts, I think, in the 2018 proposed budget. One of the interesting things, Tom, if I can, in the omnibus that we have today, just to show you, I think, part of why they're pushing this healthcare bill, is we did pretty well. We kept 99% of EPA's budget in the omnibus that's coming up. So for all the rhetoric and all the things that they want to do to go after those programs, we had a pretty good success today on it with the omnibus, but we need to keep people engaged, doing exactly what Patricia's doing, is talking about it. And, on specific issues around wolves and other things, I think we need to make sure we've got that biodiversity, not just in Wisconsin, the upper Midwest, but, there's specific issues across the country.
Steve in Piedmont, South Carolina, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Steve, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Steve and Tom. Tom and Congressman Pocan. Two quick questions, and I'll take it off the air. So the first one is, I've been very active with myself and my family protesting this year. I just want to get your idea of if that actually is helping anything. And then number two, I am originally from Pennsylvania, and fracking is a huge issue, and I just want to know your ideas on that. I'll take it off the air. Thanks.
Absolutely, Steve. Thank you. So first of all, protesting absolutely is helpful. I think anything that mobilizes people to give them a positive outlet for the angst that they have is very, very helpful, because we're watching that turn into people calling their representatives and their senators and their state representatives. And we're watching the successes that we've had in Congress, which has been multiple. I mean, we killed Trump Care the first time, not because of the Tea Party, but because of the moderates and the people in swing districts that we're hearing from all of you. So it's very, very helpful, but we've got to sustain that through 2018. In Wisconsin, when we had the collective bargaining changes, we refer to that period as the uprising. There was a long statutory gap to the recall elections, and there weren't things for people to do. So I think it's important that you keep having those activities for people to have that shared experience and that protest, because a lot of people have a lot of anxiety, but we're winning, and we can keep winning if we keep the energy up. Secondly, on fracking, I think in this Congress, you're going to have a hard time seeing changes, but I've introduced bills in the past with Jan Schakowsky and many others to ban fracking on public lands until we've got some more certainty. Clearly, we know in areas like Oklahoma and other places are having earthquakes that never had them before because of the fracking, what it does to putting into our water supply. A lot more needs to, I think, be explored to make sure our workers are safe and the local waterways and communities are safe where the fracking is occurring.
McWayne in Chino Valley, Arizona. McWayne, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. I was wondering, I understand we've just recently resumed testing nuclear weapons, and your opinion of why, when North Korea does it, we find it provocative and threaten airstrikes, and when we do it, it's what, just profitable business as usual?
Yeah, I come from I think the school of thought is, the more we can reduce the use of nuclear weapons, period, the better. Back in the nuclear freeze movement in the early 80s, I was active doing that kind of work as well. So, regardless, I think across the country, across the world, we need to have fewer nukes, which is, I think, part of the problem with North Korea. You've got someone who is a very erratic leader who's going to perhaps acquire weapons that can be a problem in the area. I think there's a fair conversation around that. Where I think we're smarter is working with China, who is the main economic partner, to try to deal with it rather than the chest pounding and what we're seeing, the bravado of a person with low approval ratings. You start wondering why maybe the aggressiveness from Trump is as aggressive as it is on that issue. But, I think you're right. Overall, I think we're a better world if we have fewer nuclear weapons, period, for a multitude of reasons.
Elizabeth in Belleville, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Elizabeth?
Oh, hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi. So I've never done this before, so sorry.
Okay.
I wanted Representative Pocan to address the efforts on the part of Republican states to amend the Constitution, and these efforts are supported by the Koch brothers and by ALEC. And I'd just like him to explain to everybody what this might do. And why they're doing it.
Elizabeth, are you talking about the conventionofstates.com, I think is the website, this group that is actually doing dress rehearsals here in the United States? They've got 32 states so far to amend the Constitution and turn it into a right-wing document, do away with the Commerce Clause, stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Congressman?
Yeah, you summed it up well, Tom. And I think the reason Elizabeth is concerned, and Belleville's in my district, so hello, Elizabeth, is because in Wisconsin, they're one of the states that haven't done it yet. And I think, they're looking to fall in line. If they just get, I think it's 3 or 4 more states to fall in line, we're going to have this process opened up. And it's not being done with any good intentions. It's being totally funded by folks that want to do a lot of bad things by having that process open. So another reason why elections matter, elections have consequences. And in 2018, where generally fewer people get out to vote, we need to sustain the energy. There are some state legislative races in 2017 in some states in the country. Most are in 2018. But, though I came from 14 years in the legislature before I got to Congress, crucial decisions happen at that level. So as much as people call their members of Congress and their U.S. senators, they need to call their state representatives and state senators as well.
Well said. Kirk in Ukiah, California. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call, Tom. And thank you, Congressman, for being a regular on this program. I enjoy listening to you every time you're on the program. And also, depending on your national aspirations, I would say it's a wise decision. As a longtime listener, I listen to Brunch with Bernie on a regular basis, and I think this program had a lot to do with his popularity. I just have a quick question, and I'll take it off the air. As a Democrat, longtime Democrat, I'm really concerned about the Democratic leadership. And I'm from California. I support Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, and so forth. But I think after the last election, we kind of needed a kind of clean slate, I guess you might say. And I supported the other gentleman that ran against Pelosi, and he didn't stand a chance. And also Keith Ellison. I really supported him as chairman of the DNC, and that didn't happen. So I'll take my answer off the air, and thanks again for all you do.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kirk. I appreciate your kind comments. And, I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm especially proud of in Congress is being the first vice chair of the Progressive Caucus. We're the largest values-based caucus within the Democratic Party, 74 people strong. I think we are leading the legislative arm of the resistance. And I'll tell you, I think as we look forward to Congress and the Senate, the more we can get progressives being more active and more into leadership positions, the better it is for the overall policy goals that we have. This last freshman class, we got some great new progressives that came in. Pramila Jayapal from Washington State, Jamie Raskin from Maryland, Ro Khanna. I probably should start going down the list. I'm getting in trouble, from California. But a lot of really great new people, plus the class before. In my class, we had a bunch of folks that came in, Mark Takano and Matt Cartwright and others. Bottom line is, I think what we need to do is just make sure that the stronger we are as a progressive caucus through our progressive budget and some of the activities we do both inside and outside of the Capitol is building the power that we can have within our caucus so that our ideas aren't the ideas that come eventually into place, but they're the ideas that Democrats are leading on. And I'm seeing a lot of that right now. I think that what you're going to find is Democrats in general are really now listening to the people, and the people are, I think, far more progressive than the leadership generally has been. And I think there's a real movement to make sure we're listening to people as we move into 2018. So I'm very optimistic, but I think we still have a lot of progressive infrastructure to build to make sure that we're in our best place possible.
Yeah, and that best place will help win elections. I am convinced of it. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for him. You can reach him at pocan.house.gov, or you can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan, MarkPocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this. And welcome back. Carol, watching us on Free Speech TV in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, thanks for watching, and thanks for calling.
Monessen, but that's okay.
Okay, my apologies, Monessen.
That's all right. I have a question for the congressman.
Go for it. You're on with
it.
him.
If it were possible, this is something I never hear mentioned, but if it were possible to reinstate the risk corridors, which Marco Rubio removed sometime late, I think in 2015, would that be helpful to the ACA? That's my first question. And my second one is, if they reinstate, instead of reinstating the part of the ACA that says you have to pay a fine if you don't, apply for it or take it, what if we rewarded in some small way people who did take it rather than penalize them for that? Would that help the ACA? That's my two questions. And
Great questions, Carol. Thank you. So, one, the risk corridors obviously is one of the things that made it tougher for the ACA to survive. So you could definitely do work around that. And that's part of why we do have a few things to make sure that the Affordable Care Act can be something that continues. We know that there's people who have need in healthcare. We clearly saw that. We set the standards now by things like pre-existing conditions and women paying the same as men and no lifetime caps on your health insurance. But we do have to fix the problems that exist. And clearly that was a poison pill put in by Marco Rubio that needs to be addressed. On your idea, I do like what you're saying, is what we've got to figure out is that fine wasn't enough to make healthy people sign up. And, maybe a carrot rather than a hammer might be the way to go. I think a public option also is another way to go to address it. But there's solutions to make what's working right now work better and to address a few of the pitfalls that exist, that you don't have to completely throw it out just so you can give a big tax break to the wealthiest in this country and to big pharma insurance companies, and then make it so that you've got tens of millions of people who now don't have health insurance. And don't forget, those costs get picked up by all the rest of us. So our insurance will go up as well because of this. And hospitals are going to be on the dime for a lot of the people who come in emergency rooms, and that's going to increase costs there as well. So you're going to have spiraling increases because of this really bad proposal the Republicans are going to put forward.
Thomas in Brooklyn, New York. You're on with Congressman Mark Pocan.
I'm on?
You're on, Thomas.
Yeah, well, the lady who spoke before me kind of took the question out, because I wanted to know what was the big deal about the risk corridor that they refused to put in, but yet they want to put in $8 billion in on their end. That was my question as far as the risk corridor was concerned.
Yeah, Thomas, I mean, you're pointing out the amazing hypocrisy of the Republicans in Washington. Unfortunately, I see it every day. I don't get fazed by it as much, but you're seeing it, and I think if everyone is kind of taking a look. So they're saying now is they're going to allow, they've got this high-risk insurance pool, which doesn't work especially well. It's very costly, and it didn't work in states like Wisconsin well and other places. And now they know it's not going to work. So some people do want to vote against it who are Republicans. So now they're going to throw, I think it's $8 billion is what the Upton Amendment would put forward, which isn't going to be close to what you need to help cover it. The whole idea that they're doing this as their answer shows we could fix the current plan a lot easier than completely throwing it out and starting anew.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. He's taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Congressman right after. Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan with us. Pocan.house.gov. Twitter @RepMarkPocan. AJ, listening on SiriusXM in Savannah, Georgia. You are on with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate your show is so smart and right on. I just enjoy it every day. And Congressman Pocan, I'm with the other caller about you need to run, sir, to get into everything you say just makes such sense, common sense. And I think so many people are forgetting about that side of instead of having prejudice, just have common sense about how to treat each other. And every time I listen to you on Tom's show, it's enlightening, and I really wish you would run for higher office. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. That's very kind of you.
That's what you called about, AJ?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Noted. David in Indian Trail North. Sorry, Congressman?
I'm sorry, if I could just say this. AJ, there's a lot of members here who are good progressives in our caucus who share the same values, I think have enormous common sense. And, I thank you for your very kind words. That's very nice of you. But I think that we've got a lot of people here. As we said, often the corporate media doesn't cover all these great members of the Progressive Caucus. I'm really fortunate to have this opportunity to be on Tom's show. But we've got some great people from across the country all fighting towards the same efforts. And, I'm very proud of my colleagues in the Progressive Caucus.
David in Indian Trail, North Carolina. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time today. I was calling about House Resolution 367, the Hearing Protection and Safety Act, to take the sound suppressors off of the NFA list. With Wisconsin being a state that its suppressor ownership is legal and also legal for hunting and a great outdoor state, what is your stance on that law?
By suppressors, changes? You're talking about what are typically called silencers for guns and rifles?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, I'm not familiar with, I think you said House Resolution 367. Like I said, there's been several thousand bills already introduced this session, and generally, if it doesn't come under your committee of jurisdiction, I'm on the Appropriations Committee, until it becomes kind of a reality, like it's coming forward, we don't take a look at it, or if constituents bring it up, sometimes we'll take a look at it. But I will commit to do that for you, David, but I don't know offhand. Also, Tom, if I can, I promised I'd give this answer. I want to make sure I get in before the end of the show. The Progressive Caucus does not come in as a completely balanced budget. However, it does reduce the public debt and the deficit by $4 trillion by 2027, which is significantly more than you've seen out of most any other plan introduced.
Wow. You're cutting $4 trillion out of our national debt, while Donald Trump wants to add $12 trillion to it. That's crazy.
It's give it all the rhetoric, right?
And he gets all the publicity. That's amazing. David in Las Vegas, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Hello, Representative Pocan.
Hi, David.
My stepdaughter, Shilin, she died about a year and a half ago because she didn't have proof of health insurance. So we're suing a local hospital here under EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment in Labor Law, for the violation of that. But the reason I'm calling is because my wife, Amy, and I, we've been organizing healthcare rallies here in Las Vegas. And we got the titles to support HR 676, Medicare for All. And now we're very unhappy that Representative Ruben Kuhn from the Nevada's 4th District, which is my district, he has not co-sponsored HR 676. In fact, he's making public statements against Medicare for All. He's saying that we need to only focus on defending the ACA. We cannot protect the ACA and co-sponsor HR 676 at the same time, which is ridiculous. And Representative Ruben Kuhn is on the Progressive Caucus that you are a chair of. And I don't think either he needs to co-sponsor HR 676 or not be on a Progressive Caucus. Is giving Progressive Caucus a bad name. So I'd like for you to talk to your colleague, Ruben Kuhn, and then really put some pressure on him to co-sponsor HR 676, Medicare for All. These Nevada representatives are demanding. I am involved with a lot of progressive organizations here in Las Vegas, and he's not getting their support.
David, you should be a lobbyist. David, let's let the congressman respond. We only have 2 minutes left.
Yeah. Well, one, David, I mean, keep doing what you're doing, because the more people in his district who reach out to him about it, the more likely he is to sponsor it. And, the one thing I will say, when you're a freshman, this is now, your 5th month of being there, you're just starting your 5th month. There's a little bit of a learning curve. Even after 14 years in the legislature, I had a little bit of a learning curve coming here. So I wouldn't rule him out yet. Augie also sent a tweet about this, and she was asking if there was a bill, and I'm glad you mentioned this, because there is a Medicare for All bill that's out there. And it's important, David, to note that we have more sponsors of that bill than we've ever had before right now in Congress. So all the work that you and other people in the country are doing around this, all this debate about healthcare, where it all comes back to, if we had a single payer system or a Medicare for All system, would probably make a lot more sense than what we currently have, is paying off. So please keep up what you're doing. I'll personally talk to Ruben on your behalf, but if you can have your constituents do it, without question, that's the best, strongest thing you could do, because if he gets 20, 30, 40, 100 calls, I'll tell you, it's hard to ignore that many people in your district asking you to sign on to a bill.
Yeah, and that has more impact than a colleague talking to you. Congressman, we have just 1 minute left in the hour and not enough time to fairly put a guest or a caller on, although the board is still full with people from California to Washington, Illinois to Maryland to Arkansas to Colorado who want to talk to you. But final thoughts for the week. What should we be doing? What should we be paying attention to?
I'll tell you, if they wind up passing this dog of a health care bill this week, everyone's going home next week, go to their town halls and light them up, because they're going to make sure that millions of people lose health insurance so they could check an arbitrary box and give a bunch of tax cuts to big wealthy donors and insurance companies and big pharma. They deserve to be lit up.
Okay. Congressman Mark Pocan, a fighter. Thank you, sir, for being with us today.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you.
Congressman Mark Pocan, you can reach his website is Pocan, POCAN.house.gov, and his Twitter account is @Rep, as in representative, Rep Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N, @Rep Mark Pocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
And welcome back to Thom Hartmann University, to our book club. We're reading today from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And this is from page 60. The chapter is Extinctions, Diversity Supports Survival. The consolidation of power and wealth in the hands of a very few rich individuals and multinational corporations has made some businessmen and politicians rich, but it's also aggregating and wiping out resources. We're directly competing with every other form of life, on the planet. As long as there was more out there to exploit, growth was possible. Now, as we approach the closed limits of our planet's capacities to generate food and process our wastes, sustainable growth has to be re-examined for the oxymoron it is. And even if nature doesn't kill us off, it seems that we're bent on doing it ourselves, or to ourselves. Pesticide use in the United States is up over 3,000% since World War II, yet more pesticides doesn't mean fewer crops lost to insects. To the contrary, we're losing 20% more of our crops to insects than in 1945. But because of increasing insect resistance to pesticides and mechanized farming techniques, the pesticide industry has economically addicted many farmers to their product. Harmless species are disappearing, but no harmful insect species has been eradicated. But while the insects, who can evolve through hundreds to millions of generations during the period of a single human lifespan generation, are becoming immune to our pesticides, we are not. This leaves us vulnerable to the poisons that we ourselves manufacture to kill off another species. For example, in September 1997, the New York Times featured a story by reporter John H. Cushman Jr. titled, "Cancer in Kids Increases, New Toxins Suspected." The story chronicled how the rate of cancer among children in the United States has skyrocketed since the 1970s, when we were using far less than half of the agricultural chemicals we are now, to the point now where the odds are 1 in 600 of a child born today getting cancer before the age of 10. Childhood cancer has become the second leading cause of childhood death behind accidents, and is now the most common fatal childhood disease, accounting for fully 10% of all childhood deaths. Since 1973, for example, rates of acute lymphoblastic leukemia increased 27% in boys and girls, and brain cancer is up 40% over the same period. 99% of all U.S. mothers' milk today contains detectable levels of DDT. In 1950, it was found that 0.5%, 0.5%, of U.S. male college students were infertile. In 1978, a study found that number had skyrocketed to 25%. And in the past 32 years, the average American male's sperm production has dropped by 30%. Some researchers attribute this to the accumulation of chlorinated hydrocarbon pesticides, which are often intended to render insects sterile, while others speculate that some plastics used in food packaging mimic the female hormone estrogen, and may be demasculizing men and increasing the risk of breast and uterine cancer in women. But that's just the beginning of the problem. In 1960, routine feeding of antibiotics to farm animals was virtually unknown. Antibiotic administration to meat animals has increased so much since then, however, that today over 55% of all antibiotics manufactured in the United States are put into animals or animal feed. This has turned our livestock into a vast breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant microorganisms. The American pharmaceutical and meat industries don't consider this a problem, nor do the politicians to whom they contribute millions of dollars a year, and continue to support the routine administration of these drugs to dairy and meat animals. But that stance is hardly supported by any common knowledge in science. The European Economic Community, the Common Market, has banned American meat products grown with antibiotics. Why? The research which so concerned the Europeans showed that in 1960, only 13% of American human staphylococcus infections were resistant to penicillin. By 1988, however, the number of penicillin-resistant staph infections in Americans had exploded to over 90%. Muppets creator Jim Henson was killed by such a drug-resistant infection, for example, despite his substantial wealth and his access to the most sophisticated and expensive healthcare system in the world. And it's not just on land. Ocean studies specialist James W. Porter at the University of Georgia points to the explosion of human viruses and bacteria filling the water of the planet's oceans, killing off coral reefs and spreading disease among humans and other life forms. He projects that 20 to 30% of coral reefs are at risk, with a 446% increase in infections just since 1996 among the reefs he has been monitoring off the Florida coast. University of South Florida researcher Joan B. Rose points out that between 20 and 24% of all people swimming in Florida's coastal beaches become infected with viruses, which can cause heart disease, ear infections, sore throats and eyes, meningitis, gastrointestinal disease, hepatitis, and diabetes. About 1%, she says, become chronically infected. Similarly, a sampling of shellfish from New York waters found over 40% infected with human pathogens. And a sampling of water from the Waikiki Beach in Hawaii found that more than a third of the samples tested were infected with human viruses. At the same time, Vermont ice cream manufacturer Ben & Jerry's is suing the government. They want to put on the label of their ice cream that the milk they use is from cows free of synthetic growth hormones, and it continues with that sort of story. So this is just, one piece of the last hours of Ancient Sunlight. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Well, it's official. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, the head of our Justice Department, has decided not to pursue federal charges, civil rights charges, in this case, the civil right of taking your life, against two white police officers who shot Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This was a particularly gruesome killing, and in fact, it was caught on video. These guys on the video, they grabbed him, they threw him on the hood of his car, they handcuffed him, they threw him to the ground, and while he's on the ground, a cop pulls out a gun and shoots him. In fact, here is the video. I'm pretty sure we bleeped all the obscenity out of it, but you can get a sense of what's going on. Here's just a short clip of it. This is we're seeing the Mr. Sterling being grabbed here now by the police, thrown to the ground. Right, I don't know if you can turn the volume up. And they're now restraining him. There's two cops on top of him, and he's basically saying, get off me. And the cops just, put a gun to his chest and shot him twice. Or at least that's what it looks like.
They shot him?
And there's Alton Sterling.
Oh.
And this is, this Jeff Sessions says, we're not going to do anything about this. Right. This is, sort of what do you expect? White cops killing a black person. Do you expect Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, the guy who said he used to think the Klan was pretty good until he learned that they smoked pot?
do you expect him to really do anything about this? I mean, this is what you get when you get Republicans in office. Republicans who use race as a dog whistle to get votes. Then the mayor-president of Baton Rouge, Sharon Weston Broome, expressed outrage. This from the Rebecca Ruiz's piece in the New York Times yesterday. The mayor-president of Baton Rouge, Sharon Weston Broome, expressed outrage that neither she nor Mr. Sterling's family had been told of the decision by Jeff Sessions not to press charges before it was reported by the Washington Post. She says, no one in my office or the governor's office has been notified by the U.S. Attorney's Office. So Sessions just said, screw it. You know, we're not even going to have the common courtesy to notify the family. Meanwhile, another black boy, the 15-year-old, a kid, was murdered by a police officer. His name is Jordan. Where'd his last name go? Hang on just a second. Jordan Edwards. There it is. I should highlight these things. Jordan Edwards, 15-year-old Jordan Edwards. He was not that it matters. I mean, you know, he was unarmed, and he was a human being. And I get really this whole thing of, oh, he was a model student, therefore, the implication being, therefore, his life was worth more than somebody who was not a model student, or somebody who had had problems with the law in the past. And of course, this is how they always try to trash young black kids who get killed by police, by white cops. Is oh yeah, Michael Brown, he was stealing cigarettes. Turns out, now in retrospect, it looks like he was, made a deal with the guy, but nonetheless, he was, here. This is from the editorial board of today's Washington Post. The Washington Post today published an op-ed. This is reflecting the opinion of the editors, the majority of the presumably all, but maybe it's just a majority. I don't know if they have consensus or majority rule there. But one or the other of the editors at the Washington Post, this is unsigned, this is by the editorial board itself. The police chief in the Dallas suburb of Balch Springs first said that the car 15-year-old Jordan Edwards was in when he was fatally shot by police was backing down the street in an aggressive manner toward the officers. Hours later, that statement was changed. Police admitted the car had been actually driving away from the police when an officer with a rifle fatally shot the boy in the head. And so the questions begin. How did something as mundane as police being called to break up a teen party result in the death of a 15-year-old described as a kid who did everything right? Did officers lie and think they could get away with blaming the victim until video evidence proved otherwise? The Washington Post is asking. I would say, yes, I bet money on it. Then the Washington Post says, and will this latest utterly needless death of a young African-American male make Black Lives Matter more than a hashtag by spurring needed police reforms? Jordan, a popular football player and model student, shot Saturday night after leaving a party with his brother and a group of friends, is the youngest of more than 330 people who have been shot and killed by police this year. 7% of those people, of those 330 people shot and killed by police this year, were, like Jordan, unarmed. Now, compare this with Great Britain, where you might have 1 or 2 police killings in an entire year, or Germany, where you might go several years without a police killing. I realize they're smaller countries, but not that much smaller. We have a serious problem with our policing culture in the United States. And, I've said this before, I think it tracks back to when at least in the southeastern United States and the southern United States, the police were the slave patrols. And, the mandate was, hey, there's a black person, get him. And that's still going on, as far as I can tell. And it's going to take a lot of effort by a lot of us, particularly white people. There's a lot of black people out there who are protesting this and angry about this, but this has been their experience for generations. But as white people are waking up to this, I'm talking to you, as white people are waking up to this, we need to be speaking out. We need to be allies in this. We need to be, we're all human beings here. And the brutalization of people based on their race is only one step away from the brutalization of people based on their politics. Again, talking to you, white people. And you're starting to see that, by the way. The violent takedowns of people who are simply protesting. You have 17 now Republican-controlled states that are moving to criminalize protest, that are saying, oh, if you kill a protester because they happen to be in the street, there's no charges. I mean, this is the logical sequence. When you condone the murder of anybody, you're eventually condoning the murder of everybody. Not to mention the fact that this is just wrong, immoral, an extension of our horrible racist past, and on it goes. So I want to put that out there. It's still going on, and with the Trump Justice Department, they've decided pretty much, we're not going to do anything about this stuff. Which doesn't surprise me when you learn that it's Jeff Sessions, who the most racist of the Keebler elves, who is promulgating this policy of not prosecuting these police. But there's something fundamentally wrong. We need higher standards for policing and better pay for police.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And better training for police, and we need and more community policing and less of the SWAT team, we're at war stuff. And welcome back. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Joyce, watching Free Speech TV in Deer Lodge, Montana. Hey, Joyce, what's on your mind?
Well, Tom, I'm sorry, but I'm an old woman. I don't hear very well, even with my hearing aids, so I have to have this on speakerphone.
That's quite all right. It sounds very, very good, Joyce. No problem. What's up?
Okay, well, as I said to the young man who took my call, I have never been one who is trying to be Miss Personality or the one that's so popular, because I believe in saying what you believe and forget about this political correctness. So last night I was wondering if there any progressive anyone that's going to call Hillary Clinton out. I have been a Democrat, a union member since I was 15 years old, and a liberal, but now I believe I'm not liberal anymore. I'm progressive. Anyway, when I saw Hillary Clinton make that speech yesterday, where she blamed, giving the reason why she lost the election, the DNC lost that election for Hillary Clinton because we already had Bernie, who was more popular than Hillary, and he could have beat Trump in a landslide. And yet Hillary's saying, no, it was Mike Comey and WikiLeaks and all this. Well, that's a bunch of BS. It was the DNC that lost the election for the Democrats, and now we're suffering for it.
Yeah, well, they certainly didn't help. I'll tell you that. But I think that, Joyce, I hear what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying, and I know that there are a number of people who share your perspective. I think it was just a terribly run campaign. I said that at the time. I said it during the campaign. I had our communications director on every week for the last 4 weeks of the campaign, and every single week I was begging him to run some positive ads telling us what her vision for America is. And instead, all we were getting were ads about how Donald Trump was a pervert. We all knew that. You don't need to spend millions of dollars in advertising to tell us that. But it is behind us now, and I'm reluctant to personally blame Hillary. I'm enthusiastic to blame David Brock and Robbie Mook and John Podesta. I think those guys they ran the worst campaign since 1972, and they can't even blame Thomas Eagleton. But But that said, she is no longer running for political office.
Well, and I know that. I know that. But
so, lessons
I'm
learned.
not running for a popularity contest. Never have in my life. I probably should never run for anything because I say what I think.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
I'm educated, and I wish that I could believe every politician like I do Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, Bernie is relatively unique, and I think Mark Pocan is in that same mold, is that, he says what he means and he means what he says, and he doesn't waffle and he doesn't prevaricate or equivocate, I guess was the word. And, if he doesn't know something, he'll tell you, and if he does have an opinion, he will be blunt about it and he will defend it. And he's not in bed with the billionaires. And those are good things. Those are all good things. And I think the more the Democratic Party can emulate those things and adopt those things, the more likely it is to start winning elections again. Joyce, thank you for your call. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity,
resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of other news things that I wanted to share with you, and then I'll get to your phone calls. An astonishing study that was put together. The article's over at Common Dreams. It's by Lauren McCauley, a staff writer at Common Dreams. And it was done by the Roosevelt Institute, which is a nonpartisan, relatively apolitical think tank, as it were, here in Washington, D.C. And they do some really great work. And this was titled 50 Shades of Green, the green being, greenbacks, dollars, money. And they looked, in this case, I mean, they could have just as easily done this with the Republicans, but I think this is fascinating that they did this with Democrats. Specifically, the authors looked at Democratic representatives who originally voted in favor of the 2010 Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, and then later voted to dismantle key parts of it. And the research team, led by Thomas Ferguson, who is a professor of science at the UMass in Boston and a senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute, he's written a book called Golden Rule about the role that big money plays in political outcomes. And again, this is not the fault of a party or the fault of a politician. This is brought to you almost exclusively by the United States Supreme Court, making law in a way that is not in the Constitution for them to do. In 1976, in the Buckley case, saying that money is the same thing as free speech and protected by the First Amendment. 2 years later, the Bellotti case, saying corporations have those same protections. 2010, Citizens United. 2013, I think it was, maybe 2012, McCutcheon. All of these cases saying the same thing. So they wanted a window of people who had actually changed their vote on a specific issue. And then they went back to see what role money might have played in changing that vote and what did it cost. And they noted, because these are the same representatives belonging to the same political party in substantially the same districts, many factors normally advanced to explain vote shifts are ruled out from the start. And what they found are the results indicate that for every $100,000 that these representatives receive from finance, that would be from the banks, the people who are impacted by Dodd-Frank, for every $100,000 they receive from finance, the odds that they would break with their party's majority support for Dodd-Frank legislation increased by 13.9%. Democratic representatives who voted in favor of finance often received $200,000 to $300,000 from that sector, which raised the odds of switching their vote by 25 to 40%. Also, they note if they were at the end of their House term or if they were members of the Financial Services Committee, they were far more likely to switch their votes. And that would be because they're getting ready to go off into the lobbying world. And hey, you want to have a voting record that looks good for potential employers in the lobbying field. And if you're on the House Financial Services Committee, of course, they're all heavily spiffed by the banks. Now, I am certain. In fact, we went through this 2 weeks ago with the piece of legislation to authorize internet service providers to sell your private information, your private browsing history, your emails, what videos you're watching, what websites you're viewing, all that stuff. And I was reading the amounts that all the Republicans who voted for that got, and some of them flipped their vote for as little as $5,000. For some, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Most of it was in the $30,000 to $50,000 or $70,000 range. Here, this is Democrats. They say it's about $100,000 to get them to flip a vote. But let's say just across the board in Congress, on average, it costs about $100,000 to get a legislator, Democrat or Republican, to flip their vote. What that means, you've got 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate. That's 535 people altogether. I'm guessing, because this was just House members, excuse me, just sneezed. This was just House members that they were looking at in this research study. I'm guessing that senators, probably it costs more to buy a senator. But excuse me, again, it's pollen season here in Washington, D.C. Somebody sent me a note saying, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." When I first moved to D.C., everybody said, "You're going to develop allergy." I never had allergies in my life, and now every spring I'm sneezing and my eyes are watering. In any case, $100,000 to flip a vote. Let's say that you're an industry, right? You're the trade association for the pharmaceutical industry, and you want to make sure that the $60 billion a year subsidy that your industry is getting from Medicaid Part D, from the government not being able to negotiate drug prices for reimbursements for Medicare. So Medicare patients who are on Medicare Part D are always paying, or the government is actually paying for them, paying full retail for drugs, even though Medicare buys hundreds of billions of dollars worth of drugs every year. And like I said, this is a $60 billion subsidy. That's the additional profit they make because of this. So let's say you're Big Pharma. If you give $100,000 to every member of Congress, that's $5.3 million, $5.35 million, $5,350,000 to get a $60 billion profit. This is not how a democracy should work. This is the core, this is the cancer at the core of our democracy. It has infected both parties, as this study demonstrates. I would argue that for the Republican Party, it's actually a business model. For the Democrats, it's more of necessary evil / anomaly. But or at least with the Congressional Progressive Caucus, it's actually rare to anomaly. But we've got to do something about this. This is how our politics have become corrupted. And in my opinion, the thing to do about it is to go to movetoamend.org and toss in some funds or volunteer to help out and pass a constitutional amendment that says money's not speech and corporations aren't people.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Until we do that, we are going to continue to have the best Congress money can buy, which is not a good Congress. We'll be back. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, The Fate of the World and What We Can Do About It. And this is from page 165, The Lives of Ancient People.
from the San and the Kogi value community and cooperation. We are part of the world, not separate from it. The chapter. One of the oldest cultures on earth is that of the Kung Bushmen. It's an exclamation mark to make the noise. Of the Kalahari Desert in the northern parts of South Africa. The exclamation point in their name, Kung, represents a sound in their language which we don't have in English. It's a popping noise made in the mouth by forming a vacuum between the tongue and the top of the mouth and then pulling the tongue down quickly. There are 3 other sounds in their language for which we have no letters, all of them clicks or pops, made by similarly clicking the tongue against the front of the mouth or the sides of the mouth and teeth. They're such a unique culture that although they're ancient, their language contains sounds that have traveled to no other human tongue on Earth. Over the past few decades, as they become more well-known, they've asked anthropologists and linguists that they be called the San, although most texts from before the 1980s refer to them as the Kung. They and their life are portrayed wonderfully well in the film The Gods Must Be Crazy. The San are racially distinct from the other Africans who have conquered the continent in the past millennia. Their skin is more yellow than black, and their eyes are slightly slanted as if they share a common ancestor with Asians, or perhaps are indeed an early ancestor of the Asians. Their hair is black and curly like other Africans, but they're comparatively short and thin, often standing less than 5 feet tall and weighing fewer than 100 pounds. The lives of the San were first chronicled quite elegantly by Lawrence Vanderpost, a South African explorer and writer. In his 1961 book, The Heart of the Hunter, he tells of coming across a small Kung tribe of about a dozen adults and children as they crossed a particularly hot and barren part of the desert. Vanderpost and his fellow explorers started hunting some game so the Bushmen could have extra food to carry on their journey toward the lightning on the horizon, where the seasonal rains were beginning. The explorers spent an entire day hunting with their Land Rovers and provisioned the Bushmen well for their trip. As the little tribe was leaving, Vanderpost and his group stood to wave goodbye, but the Bushmen simply walked off with many smiles. No thank yous were ever given for all that food. One of Vanderpost's assistants, a hunter who'd never encountered Bushmen before, commented that they seemed ungrateful and uncaring. Ben, one of the other men in the group who understood Bushman culture, responded that to give another human food and water is only good manners and is routine behavior among the Bushmen. If the white men had been starving on a long trek and the Bushmen had found them, they would immediately share their food and water, even if it endangered their own survival, and they would not expect a thank you in response. In fact, in San Bushman culture, to eat in front of another person who is without food is considered an immoral act, every bit as horrific as if in our culture a person were to walk out onto a busy city sidewalk, pull down their pants, and defecate. Everyone would be shocked and horrified. As it happens, the San do say thank you. They do it whenever they're hunting, when they're making a decision to take a life. No animal is killed for food by the San without being thanked by them, both at the time of the hunt and later when a dance is done for the soul of the animal. And animals are only killed when there is a clear need for food. For those of us who grew up in modern civilization, it's difficult to imagine a life and culture where such fundamental things are simply taken for granted. When we stop behind a car at a red light, we don't open the door and run up to the car in front of us to thank them for being so considerate as to follow the basic rules of the road and stop for the red light. It's simply a given that everybody does that. No thanks are required. Thanking people for doing something implies they had a choice to do otherwise and did so out of a desire to be nice. But imagine a world where feeding another person is as much an automatic response as stopping at a red light. A world where a person who fails to feed or care for another is ostracized or punished, the way we give people tickets when they run red lights. Where the care of others is more important than even the care of yourself. Where the teaching all things that you should want others to do to you, do ye even so unto them, is actually practiced. Not out of an effort, but as part of a daily routine, as the normal way things are, as the basic assumption of a society. That is San culture, the way of an older culture. A story of a storyteller of Chippewa and Cree ancestry told me that his people have a belief that if a person visits your home and you fail to share with them food and water so that they leave hungry or thirsty, and then the Creator decides to take them home at that time, they will arrive in the spirit world hungry and thirsty. He said the responsibility for that person's condition in the world is yours because you were the last person he met and you had an opportunity to feed him. So we have an obligation to feed and give water and shelter and whatever else a person may need whenever they come into our village or our home. In our younger culture, we value productivity and individual possession. In their older culture, they value community. Most modern people find it difficult or impossible to imagine a world where community is more important than possessions. Yet this is how about 1% of the world's population still lives, and how all of your and my ancestors lived for hundreds of thousands of years. In 1997, a group of 13 researchers released a study in which they quantified the value of all the environments on the planet, from measuring the size of the Louisiana shrimp harvest to how much people were willing to pay for access to a lake, coral reef, or other natural attraction. They concluded that the planet's natural areas were worth about $33 trillion. And then from there, I go on to talk about how that's a crazy way to value anything. And we need to be, revisiting these ancient culture values. The book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, the House of Representatives just passed their Let's Repeal Obamacare bill. Mo Brooks and, or maybe it wasn't Mo Brooks. Well, in any case, there were two Republican congressmen who were holding out and who could have blown the whole thing up, and they were holding out for an $8 billion subsidy for the states for the high-risk pools, which isn't anywhere near enough. And if you get dropped into a high-risk pool, you're going to see your insurance rates go up to $25,000 a year or more, according to AARP. But they just, the whole criticism against Obamacare is, oh, you're taking tax dollars and using it to subsidize people's health insurance, and that's what they just passed it, doing that, only doing it poorly. Number one. That I wanted to share with you. And number two, I mentioned in the beginning of this hour that Jeff Sessions has said he is not going to prosecute the two white police officers who murdered Alton Sterling. But he is prosecuting, right? He is. I mean, he's the head prosecutor of America. And Desiree Feruz, who is an activist with Code Pink, was at Jeff Sessions' hearings at the confirmation hearings. She was way back in the back of the room. And Jeff Sessions, one of the senators, made a comment to the effect of, Jeff Sessions has always been an advocate for the rights of people of color, or words to that effect. And she literally laughed out loud. And she said this was involuntary. I mean, she just, you're kidding. She didn't even say you're kidding. It was just, And Jeff Sessions prosecuted her for that. And just a few hours ago, a jury convicted her of disruption. A jury returned a verdict shortly after noon on Wednesday. That's today. A two-day trial in the United States Court in Washington ended on Tuesday. Ms. Feruz of Bluemont, Virginia, said she was really disappointed. They're going to try an appeal. But she's facing a year in jail for laughing at Jeff Sessions. So, just to be clear, just to make sure everybody understands this, laugh at Jeff Sessions, you get a year in prison. Shoot a black man who's on the ground and handcuffed, and you skate. That's our Justice Department now, it seems. Benny in Moville, Iowa. Am I saying that right, Benny?
Yeah, Tom, this is Benny.
Hey, you're on the air. What's up?
Okay, I was a union steward for almost 20 years. And what people don't realize is that when they hear or see somebody that's been intimidated, they are also intimidated.
Right. It's contagious.
Well, but now we don't have, as a society, empathy for people that are outside of our social economic circle.
Yeah. And then sometimes racial circles as well. And gender, for that matter.
And gender. But if we realize that I've also been intimidated, the next time I get pulled over by a cop, my hands are going to stay on that steering wheel.
And you're a white guy, I'm assuming?
I'm a white guy, 70. I'm 70 years old. I shouldn't be afraid of nothing.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I'm not, but you know, I
But-
noticed this at.
But the fact that the police are willing to kill unarmed black people has got you concerned that you're next. Is that what you're saying?
It's personal.
Yeah, yeah.
It is personal.
It needs to be personal. We all need to get it. That it could be you too, and you don't have to be black. I mean, which is kind of the weakest argument that you can make to white people. But it is an argument. I think the more important one is just this is wrong. This is just plain old, flat out wrong. And it should not be happening in the United States of America. Benny, thank you. Thank you for your call. Jessica in El Dorado, Arkansas. Hey, Jessica, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I have 2 quick points. Now, we've had it rough in Arkansas for quite a while. I'm a chronic pain patient, and people who don't even have a doctor's degree have decided to step up in doctor's office, intimidate, shut down. And they basically, there is such a thing as true chronic pain, and you have to pass a test and go through all this stuff. Okay, the second thing is
Jessica, on that first thing, if I may, is your concern that the whole opiate hysteria is making it hard for you, a person who actually is in pain, to get pain drugs?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. See, this is, and this is where, we really need to publicize the rat park study. The rats who would take heroin or cocaine over and over and over again until they died were in little square one square foot cages their entire lives. They were in prison. They were in solitary confinement. Well, if I was in solitary confinement, I would take heroin until I died, if it was offered to me. But when they built this rat park, when they built a nice paradise for rats where they could play, they could have sex, they could have food, they had places to hide, they had places to nest, they had places to rear their young, and they offered them heroin water versus regular water, they ignored the heroin water and just went with the regular water. So the opiate epidemic that we have in the United States is not an epidemic, in my opinion, based on this science, and it's solid science, is not an epidemic based on the availability of opiates, which is how it's being sold. It is it's a crisis, frankly, of the hollowing out of the American middle class, of despair, of the destruction of quality of life as a consequence of 40 years of neoliberal Reaganomic policies. And those policies are devastating people's lives, and so they're turning to drugs. And the collateral damage of that is people like you, Jessica, people who are in pain, who need these drugs. And I think it's just so wrong the way that all this is going on. Anyhow, you wanted to make one other point?
One other point, a gentleman called the other day from Arkansas, and this is how I found about this. He said yet another bunch of laws have been passed in Arkansas having to do with drugs, but not really, and they're targeting, as usual, mainly the black people.
Mm. Oh, with having to do with illegal drugs, you mean?
I don't know. I was so shocked when I heard him. I guess illegal drugs. Do you remember him?
I don't. I'm sorry, Jessica.
Well, he called and he said that we had it rough in Arkansas for quite a while now, and he said it's going to get a lot worse because they passed a lot of new laws having to do with drugs, but not really.
Well, this is what happens when you live in a red state. I mean, when the Republicans are in charge, they just do this kind of damage to people. Jessica, I got to move along, but thank you for the call and for sharing your story. Connie in Ransomville, New York. Hey, Connie, what's up?
Hi. I was appalled to hear you say that this woman who laughed out loud at Jeff Sessions gets 1 year in prison. I experienced a personal story. My brother-in-law molested my daughter, climbed through her bedroom window in the state of Michigan, Berrien County, Michigan, and he was given 12 days in jail.
Wow.
What's wrong with our system?
But laugh at Jeff Sessions and you're in jail for a year. Yeah. There's something seriously wrong with our system, Connie, and it's all over the place. Connie, thanks for the call. And I'm sorry to hear about your daughter. Kyle in Enid, Oklahoma. Hey, Kyle, what's up?
Yeah, Tom, I'll try to explain this properly and not mess it up, so you don't think I'm a troll or a Republican calling in or whatever. But
it's okay if you are.
Your comments, and not just you, pretty much everybody, on the police officers shooting people. I couldn't agree with you more that there is a percentage of police officers that don't belong on the force and belong in prison. The same with the military. There's X number of people who get in the military probably to kill somebody. They want to kill somebody. They're bad people, and they belong in prison. But, Tom, I went to I own a couple of pistols that I keep in the house. I'm not a big gun person. I don't hunt. I hate hunting. My son asked me to go to a class. He wanted to carry a concealed weapon.
Kyle, I just have a minute till we're going to hit a break, okay, so I'm going to ask you to truncate this.
I learned in this class, who was conducted by a police officer, when someone pulls a gun, you only have about a second to a second and a half to react.
Sure.
And I would like to ask anybody, if you're thrown into these situations every day, that you don't know what's coming at you, ever. You know, they could be drunk, stoned, mad, whatever. People are going to make mistakes. Good people are going to make mistakes.
Alton Sterling was laying on the ground. It's on video.
I'm not talking about a specific point. I'm saying that guy probably ought to go to prison. No doubt about it. There's bad cops.
But Jeff Sessions said, no, we're not going to prosecute him.
No, I don't. Believe me, Jeff Sessions shouldn't even be where he is. I'm not defending those people. I'm defending certain police officers that are scared for their life.
No, I get it. It's a terrible job. And you know, I actually went through the Georgia Police Academy. I wrote 3 novels about private detectives. I'm real familiar with the police culture in this country. And I have friends who are police officers. And have for years and years. And I lived in Europe for a year, and I interacted with the German police on numerous occasions. And I'm telling you, we need to raise our standards and our pay. Kyle, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
There needs to be national standards. We need to be tracking police violence. We're not doing any of these things, and other countries do, and they have a much better experience of policing. It works better. And welcome back. Greg in Mountain Home, Arkansas. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind today?
Yes.
Greg, watching Free Speech TV?
Yes.
Yeah, you're on the air. What's up?
Okay, just a second. Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Hi. Is this Tom?
That's Tom, yep.
Yeah, Tom, this is Greg. We passed a marijuana law here about 3 weeks ago or so.
For medical marijuana, right, in Arkansas?
Medical marijuana. And the person that's ahead of the Attorney General decided to just pull it for no reason and said, we're not going to do it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tragedy. I mean, that woman who called a little bit ago from Arkansas with chronic pain, marijuana seems to, for a number of people, be very, very, as effective as opiates, in some cases more effective than opiates.
And I'm a chronic pain patient myself. I have to go to Missouri to get my medication because they won't give you any medication in Arkansas that works. The doctors here are scared to death.
Right.
Oh,
I went through this when I had my back surgery. I went to my GP and I was in pain and I was like, can you give me some pain pills? And she was like, I really want you to go to the surgeon and get them from him because they don't come down on surgeons the way they come down on general practitioners. And she was just plain old flat out scared of the drug police. Right. And this is somebody with an MD after their name. That's crazy.
Yeah, and we were looking forward to being able to try marijuana legally for our pain down here, but they just pulled it. No explanation, nothing.
That is terrible. That is terrible. So maybe that's what our earlier caller, she was wondering about the drug laws in Arkansas. Maybe that's what she was thinking of.
Yeah, there was two separate ones that on marijuana. One was for just legalizing it, and the other one was for medical marijuana. Everybody voted to pass both. They pulled the one on legalizing it for pleasure and kept the medical one, and then they waited a while and pulled that. And so, we have there's no options. We've gone through this twice down here.
That's incredible. There was an article in one of the news. It might have been the L.A. Times. It was in one of the major newspapers a couple of weeks ago that I read online, talking about how they're actually now able to measure that people are actually moving to states where recreational marijuana has been decriminalized. And they're doing it not because they want to, there's some people who are doing it because they just want to be able to get high, instead of drinking beer, they can smoke a joint. But a lot of people are moving there because medical marijuana is so effective for such a wide variety of things, particularly for like getting to sleep at night and staying asleep all night. It's for everything from minor aches and pains to severe pain. For there's just a whole bunch of conditions that for dealing with chemo, and people are they're moving to Oregon, they're moving to Washington State, they're moving to Colorado. Pretty soon it'll be California, and the states like where you live in Arkansas, people are leaving, they're fleeing just around this issue of marijuana. It's pretty amazing. Greg, thanks for the call and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do, The Elements of a Great Working Life, and goatsfortheoldgoat.com. And on the line with us, the author, founder of both, Ellen Ratner. Hey, Ellen.
Well, thank you very much.
What's going on?
I just want to remind people Mother's Day is around the corner, and we have beautiful Swarovski crystal hearts, plus ways of helping people in one of the 4 major famine areas in the world right now, which is goats, plural, for the old goat.
Right, and that's in South Sudan.
That's right.
Yep.
Where you've been. Okay.
Yep,
so
with you.
Before I start out with FBI Director Comey's testimony today, I want to just say that this just came through. Earth Justice just filed a suit against President Trump and his executive order that would lift the ban on offshore drilling. They called it selling off oceans to polluting organizations.
Wow. Good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is happening. The other thing that is going on is that FBI Director Comey today testified in his decision to reopen the Clinton email investigation. He said that he would have done the same thing over again if he was given the chance. He said that, there is this question of what WikiLeaks did, and that the FBI was never called to see if their release would compromise leaks. He called it intelligence porn. And he said that he felt that WikiLeaks was made to damage people. As you know, my brother Michael, before he passed last year, almost exactly a year ago, was the lawyer for WikiLeaks.
Yeah. So
he also said that he found more than 600,000 emails of interest on the computer of former New York Congressman Anthony Weiner.
Right. So he's basically trying to defend his actions during the election.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not a surprise.
Okay. Now, an officer who fatally shot a boy in Texas was fired after body cam showed something different than what the officer said. So yesterday, a police officer, he was fired yesterday, but on Saturday night he killed a 15-year-old boy. He said that they were called to the party house to investigate where there had been underage drinking. The police originally said that the officer fired at the car because it was backing up aggressively towards the officer, but then they had 2 body cam videos that showed something very different, and they said the car was driving away from the officers.
Right. And he pulled out a rifle and shot this kid in the head.
That's right.
This young black boy.
I mean, unbelievable what you see really going on. Okay. Also, the Committee to Protect Journalists today is World Press Freedom Day. That's a UNESCO day at the United Nations and across the world. Thailand's military ruling junta banned a panel discussion on this is from the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, and they basically have continued to harass them. The event was titled Memories of 1932. That's almost 100 years ago. But now the Foreign Club said that they're going to have a discussion on World Press Freedom Day on the state of media freedom in Thailand. So by banning this, they actually promoted something that I'm sure they don't want.
Wow, that's going to be an interesting one.
Okay. President Abbas from Palestinian Authority was at the White House today. At first, he went to the Oval Office. He didn't speak, and there were not any officials there. And then they went and they had lunch in the cabinet room, and he was there with his delegation. The president said that it's a great honor to have President Abbas with us. Let's see if we can find a solution. Now, as unfortunately you know, that President Abbas is not really president of all of the Palestinian Authority.
He maybe I don't know. He doesn't have control over Gaza, but I thought that all the rest of the What am I missing here?
Well, what you're missing here is that President Abbas can, in fact, negotiate for the Palestinian Authority, but he does not control parts of the Palestinian Authority.
Is that a geographical thing, or is this?
Well, I mean, it's because Hamas got in there.
Oh, and that's in Gaza.
Right.
Right, yeah, okay. I got that. Yep.
Exactly. Okay, so they also said, this is very interesting, and I did not know this. Vice President Pence said, I want to welcome the president and his entire delegation here to the White House. It's good to see you again. My family had the privilege of your hospitality during a Christmas visit just a few short years ago. Did you know that the vice president visited President Abbas? I did not know that.
No, I didn't know that either.
Okay. Now, also, I have a friend, even though he's a Republican, Representative Chris Smith. He is head of he's head of the Africa Committee for Foreign Affairs, and he and the lead Democrat, Karen Bass, who's from California, had a bill that advanced to the House Foreign Affairs Committee today, and it's called the Smith-Bass-Douglas, named after Frederick Douglass.
Oh, he's still doing great work, you know.
Yes.
Excuse me.
He is. So it directs grant money for education of vulnerable children to avoid traffickers. It gets hotels to identify possible trafficking victims. It makes sure that people who are, in fact, on airplanes, et cetera, can identify them. I know that they do train Amtrak people to identify people who might be at the hands of traffickers, and it makes a more accurate reporting from the U.S. State Department in terms of trafficking and persons report.
Fascinating.
So that is very good news, to say the least.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the president, President Obama and Mrs. Obama have announced their conceptual design for an Obama Presidential Center. They say that it's more than a building or museum. It will be a living, working center for engagement. It's going to include 3 buildings, and that it will hopes that it gives visitors not just memories, but a way to really create change and become active in their community.
That's marvelous. That is absolutely marvelous. And you would expect nothing less from President Obama. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. Ellen, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back. Charles Sauer is going to be with us. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading from Walking Your Blues Away, How to Heal the Mind and Create Emotional Well-Being from Chapter 1, How Trauma Sticks and the Mechanism of PTSD. One of the enduring mysteries in the field of psychology is why the same event produces such different memories and responses in different people. As the New York Times reported in a July 1st, 2004 article, 1 out of every 6 soldiers coming home from the war in Iraq is showing signs of emotional difficulties, particularly post-traumatic stress disorder. Citing a report in the New England Journal of Medicine, the writer noted the researchers surveyed more than 6,000 soldiers in the month before and after service in Iraq and Afghanistan. Almost 17% of those who fought in Iraq reported symptoms of major depression, severe anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder, compared with 11% of the troops who served in Afghanistan. In World War II, post-war depression and anxiety was called battle fatigue. In World War I, we called it shell shock. The question isn't so much why it happens. We know GIs in war do and see horrific things. The question that perplexes us is why post-war anxiety and depression haunts some veterans and not others. Of course, some vets see harder combat than others, but even that doesn't account for the statistics. There are still huge variations among individual soldiers in how they respond to the same event. The same is true in the civilian world. Some people develop PTSD and others don't, facing the exact same circumstances. In order to understand why some people are still shocked months and even years after a traumatic event, it's necessary to first understand how the brain and mind processes trauma. The brain is a complex collection of deeply interconnected parts and processes. I'm vastly oversimplifying here for the purpose of description. In light of those caveats, here's a possible scenario that's not inconsistent with much of what's known about brain function. There's a part of the limbic brain, or visceral brain, called the hippocampus that's believed to function as a one-day scratch pad for memory. Everything you experience throughout the day is stored in the hippocampus. In order for the impressions of the experience to become a long-term memory, they must pass through the hippocampus into the rest of the brain. People with a damaged hippocampus remember past events but have extreme difficulty learning new things. Although the rest of the brain is able to integrate recent information from the hippocampus in relation to stored memories, in order to understand that one thing happened a week ago and another thing happened a month ago, the hippocampus knows only one time, today. During the night as we sleep, the hippocampus dumps its information from the day into the rest of the brain for processing, sorting, storing, and disposing of irrelevant information. As the brain is processing the details of the day from the hippocampus, we experience what we call dreaming. Many sleep researchers are convinced that when we experience REM sleep, most of the events, including the traumas of our daily life, are processed.
The processing of information management completed. When we wake up in the morning, the hippocampus is once again empty and ready to record another day. The problem emerges when the hippocampus is carrying information that's too much or too hot for the larger brain/mind to handle. When a recent memory is too strong to be easily and unremarkably processed, it presents in our dream world as a nightmare. If that still doesn't download the information from the hippocampus, then the trauma either becomes buried in the subconscious, a process Freud referred to as repression, or it gets thrown back into the hippocampus the next morning. It's as if the brain says, whoa, that's too much for me to process in one evening. Please hang on to it for another day. When the person wakes up in the morning, the information's still there in the hippocampus, still remembered and known and felt as if it happened that same very day. The conjecture that the hippocampus knows little about the more distant past accounts for the unique feature of true PTSD, that the person feels every day as if the past event happened today, or at least in the very recent past. The trauma is always front, center, new, fresh, and raw. The consequences can be psychologically and emotionally devastating. Every day is affected by a past event. The traumatic event never passes from now until then, and is never processed and filed away in the memory banks, where it loses the power to cause pain and problems on a daily basis. The impact of this on the mind and the emotions is staggering. Brain scans even demonstrate that before a PTSD event has been processed, the amygdala, a part of the brain responsible for strong emotional states, such as those involved with survival or the perception of a threat to survival, and the hippocampus are not functioning normally. The brain scan makes it possible to, in a way, see the effect of the stuck memory. After processing the memory, these parts of the brain usually return to normal functioning. One of the key concepts of many schools of psychology is that human beings are most functional when every part of the mind has access to all other parts. In particular, this functionality is a matter of having full access to positive resources, such as memories of times when we were successful in our undertakings and the good feelings we associate with those accomplishments. Working from this level of functionality, then, when we take on a new task, for example, we first remember times in the past when we attempted something similar and accomplished our goals. This functionality can be accessed in all endeavors, from embarking on a new love relationship to making your first public speaking engagement. Memories of past accomplishments and capabilities are stored in parts of the brain far from the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala and hippocampus, part of our brain's most primary and primitive structures, lie deep in the brain. Thus, having a negative memory stuck deep in the hippocampus blocks the pain and fear associated with that memory from reaching and associating with positive memories and resource states, which are housed in more distant parts of the brain. So in other words, if we don't get these traumatic memories out of the hippocampus, then everything coming in gets filtered through that and blocked having access to resource states that can help and heal us. So the rest of the book is how to get that stuff out of the hippocampus. The book is Walking Your Blues Away.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And in the studio with me, Charles Sauer, the libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute. MarketInstitute.org is the website. You can tweet Charles at Market Institute or at Charles Sauer. It's S-A-U-E-R. Charles, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So last week you were here and we were talking about how and feel free to interrupt me at any point if I'm misrepresenting this, but this is my understanding of it, how the libertarian worldview on harm, on torts, on damages, is essentially that it should not be, with some exceptions, but generally speaking, should not be the role of government to prevent us from being harmed. It should be the role of government, specifically the courts, and to punish or to adjudicate the consequences of a harm. So if Koch Industries wants to build a cracking plant, the cracking is a refinery, right down the street from my home, and it's pumping poison out into the air, that instead of there being some damn government regulation that says they got to clean it up and only clean, pure air can come out of their plant, instead, when I get cancer, I should be able to sue them, right? Am I right so far?
You're right. Where we're going to disagree is the why. So you want me to let you continue laying that out, or
sure, go for the why.
So, I mean, the why is that the government keeps laying band-aids on these things. So we see company A pollutes, people get cancer. We create a regulation to stop that. It's something that happens after the fact. I think some of the conversation on Twitter last time
and just a second, it doesn't happen after the fact in Europe because they have the precautionary principle. We've got 80,000 unregulated chemicals in our environment here in the United States. Only about 6,000 of those chemicals are allowed in Europe because they've tested them. They won't allow something to go on the market until it's tested. Here in the United States, you can poison people, and then when you find out that, for example, I think it's called BPA, or I forget the in plastics that's a hormone disruptor, or the stuff that's on the
6, 4, and 2-year-old, it's BPA.
Right, and yeah, exactly, and the thermal receipts now on all the receipts that you're getting, that paper, that's almost pure. I think it's BPA. It's one of those chemicals that's a hormone disruptor, and they're discovering that people who work in retail who handle these receipts a lot are starting to get I mean, it's like, so we discover stuff after the fact, which is almost libertarian. But
so
anyhow,
what I like is you use the courts, and it's not that the courts are punishing these people. That's the idea. Isn't that solves the problem, right? But if you are focusing on the fact that the courts will solve the issue, the idea is to change the incentives of companies so that they're taking care to not get sued on the back end. So they don't want to pollute because they're not going to get sued, because the fine is not going to be, as we talked about last week, $6,500 or $2,500 for a life. Instead, it could be millions and millions and millions. So what you do is you're changing the incentives in the market so that the company will watch their pollution. They'll watch their receipts. They'll watch the BPA in the bottles so that they're not harming my kid because I'm going to come after them.
Yeah, but you're going to come after them after your kid has already developed some god-awful disease.
And now the blood is on the government's hands, and that's really what you're proposing. I'm proposing that the government isn't the arbiter. Look, when we look at Bernie Madoff, the government went in and checked Bernie Madoff's investments several times, and in fact, because they checked his investments, and he was doing illegal things, but when they signed off on him, now the teachers' unions invested in there and other places invested in, and again, that is on the government, and I think
these are the exceptions that prove the rule. But where I wanted to go with this is, and actually somebody, after you were on last week, somebody called in and presented this to me as a kind of a thought experiment and said, run this by Charles. So, okay, here you are. So, you live where you live, and you've got 3 kids, and one of them, I think, is school age, right?
6-year-old.
6-year-old, okay. So your 6-year-old is walking to school or walking, down the street, and it's a school zone. And because you're a libertarian, you lobbied the school not to put up a sign that says warning school zone, because after all, people should be sued to, when they go through there at 60 miles an hour and wipe out a kid. So what are you going to do when your daughter gets killed?
I go after that driver like they don't know what was coming. I sue them. I want to get the biggest settlement or price. Well, first,
but what if you live in Texas where they've limited, they've had so-called tort reform that the Republicans are promoting, and the most you can get is $250,000.
And that is why I have always opposed that tort reform. That tort reform is awful. And what's the worst part about it is that the limited government types and the conservatives that push it don't understand that that's limiting the free market and limiting the market reaction and limiting what I'm talking about is the way that regulation should happen. It's conservatives not understanding their own argument.
So let me just get this right. So it's fine with you if your daughter is killed as long as you can sue.
No, it's not.
You don't want to prevent that from happening until after it's happened, until after she's dead.
What I think is the bigger deterrent than a little sign that's 25. I live in a school zone, right? I walk my daughter to school every week, and I can tell you how many people don't pay attention to that sign. All right, people are running U-turns in our neighborhood across the school walk. Right. People don't pay attention to government signs because government regulations are every place. On the other hand,
if there was a police car sitting there, if there was a camera.
If they thought that I could bankrupt them and their kids and their kids' kids, then they might not do it. If I could go after everybody in their family for
that's kind of a death penalty argument. The fact of the matter is that typically when people are engaging in illegal behavior, they're not considering the consequences. And you know, somebody speeding through a school zone. I mean, they're not thinking, gee, I might hit somebody and I might get sued. You know, just the horror of killing somebody, I think, is more than enough to stop the most rational people. But you know, I'm with the precautionary principle. I think, you know, in a school zone, not only should there be a sign that says this is a school zone, speed limit 25, but also, as you find in many school zones, they've got cameras that point at the cars. They've got things that tell you how fast you're going, so you can know if you're breaking the law. And if you're going more than 5 or 10 miles over that speed limit, that thing can also take the picture of your license plate, and you get a $100, $200 ticket in the mail. And that, it seems like, it would prevent your daughter from being killed. And I don't understand why.
It still doesn't have. I mean, you've seen the videos of people running by school buses as their stop sign comes out, right? There's videos all around the web.
I've seen, you know, one of my kids, when he first learned how to drive, drove by a school bus and got nailed for it by a police, you know, and you know, so I'm very familiar with that. And his parents did not support him in this, you know. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to go beat this. It was like, you know, you're gonna pay the fine on this. But it's because that was just, you know, you don't do that.
And the reason you have him pay that fine is so that he remembers it the next time, so that he doesn't do it again.
That was big government. That was the government catching him doing something.
That was the system that we had to deal with under a system where if you don't have that regulation, and look, you know, one of the last regulations that I'm going to want to go after is this school bus zone. Like, I mean, this is a libertarian argument.
Well, either libertarianism works or it doesn't. I mean,
a libertarian litmus test is the black tar heroin question. I mean, we have a long ways to go from the government we have now to allowing the sale of black tar heroin on the streets.
Well, they do in Portugal, and it's actually reduced the drug problem.
I get it. That's why it's a litmus test. Are you willing to?
I don't think that has anything to do with libertarianism. I think that has to do with the stupidity of the drug war. You know, the libertarianism is you know, a philosophy that has never successfully worked in any country in the history of the world, to the best of my knowledge.
I will agree that libertarianism is something that hasn't been tested.
Well, I think it's tested in every third world country. Where there's no regulation and the police are ineffective.
No, they are not implementing libertarianism. They are implementing other.
I was and Ellen Ratner and I were in the libertarian paradise of South Sudan. You know, where the government basically does nothing, but there is a court system. You can sue people in courts. But you know, hey, you know, I had to have 4 guys with submachine guns walking around with me. I mean, it's
property rights aren't respected in South Sudan, right? I mean, this is among other things, but property.
They are actually. You can buy property, and in fact, you know, Ellen has set up this Goats for the Old Goats thing, and she's set up a little community center, and she bought the land to do it, as far as I know. But you know, we're wandering far afield here. So you're okay with your daughter's school zone not being marked, which means that more and more cars are going to go faster and faster, and her getting killed, as long as you can sue. Are you also okay with doing away with stop signs and traffic lights? That's big government regulating our behavior for our own good.
So it is, and there's this is actually Ayn Rand is actually a believer in government, and I think that this is one of those places where it could be interesting to talk about. I don't believe in getting rid of stop signs and stop lights. Ayn Rand believes that government there is to make things more efficient. So you don't have to carry a gun. You don't have to have security forces following you around. Government is there for a reason. It should just be there for a limited reason. And I think traffic lights are a good limited reason why government should be there.
So then why not slow down in the school zone signs? And the enforcement thereof. Is that not a variation?
You're not going to see me take my briefcase and my leather shoes into any office very soon and to lobby them to remove those restrictions. But when we get to the end,
either you believe it or you don't.
I made the case just a second ago, I believe, for the ability to remove those, because what you said is if you remove,
how is that different from a stop sign?
If you remove stop signs or speed signs, then traffic will speed up and somebody's going to get hit. I don't think.
But then they can sue.
But the number 2 isn't necessarily going to happen, and that's the issue here. What you do is you change the incentives. You remove the signs and you lift the limit on people being able to be sued. You change the incentives. People slow down.
I don't think so. Probably half of America is judgment proof. Literally half of Americans right now cannot deal with a $500 emergency. They have no savings. They're wiped out. The credit card debt in the United States, it was at $800 when Reagan came into office. $17,000 now. Yep. It's mind-boggling. So people are judgment proof. They don't care if you sue them. You're not going to get anything.
I don't think that that's correct. People think even at $17,000 in debt, people believe that they can get out of it. I mean, this is a financial education issue.
Well, but if you hit them with a $250,000 lawsuit, they're just going to declare bankruptcy and walk away from it.
We make it just like the student loan debt that everybody else wants.
Luck with that. Okay, Charles Sauer, always interesting. Marketinstitute.org and at Charles Sauer. Charles, thank you.
Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after. And welcome back. Let's see here. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind? It's been a while.
Well, I just want to talk about Donald Trump. I don't know why anybody cannot see it. This man is seriously ill. I grew up with a kid across the street from me who has acted the same exact way he acts when something don't go his way. Like that health care bill. He'll never stop going at it because he's trying to convince everybody, one by one, that his plan is the correct plan.
Yeah, he just got 2 congressmen to vote for this thing, and it cost him $8 billion, $4 billion per vote. That's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, the man is sick. He has a serious illness.
But actually, it was Paul Ryan who was doing all that. It wasn't Donald Trump. His narcissism concerns me. His ahistorical worldview concerns me a lot more, and his embrace of tyrants, despots, and strongmen, and frankly, I think his aspiration to be one is the thing that concerns me the most.
Well, I think Paul Ryan is the father to a sick child. That's what I believe.
You think that Paul Ryan is basically playing daddy role to Donald Trump? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, he's trying to give his child everything he wants. And when he don't get what he wants, he kicks and screams, and Paul Ryan goes back to bat for him again.
Yeah. Well, I would not argue with that characterization, Corky. Corky, thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. John in Round Lake, Illinois. Hey, John, what's up?
Yes. What do you say to Trump supporters and conservatives believing that if they lower corporate taxes and taxes is going to create jobs and save middle-class workers money? And do you think it will stop companies from going overseas?
Yeah. No, it won't stop companies from going overseas. Corporations in America pay an average of 17% income tax, which is 0.3% higher than the average of all the developed countries in the world. So basically, American corporations pay the same taxes as pretty much everywhere else in the world, number one. Number two, the reason why I don't think that dropping taxes will cause companies to create jobs is because it never has. I mean, literally, it never has. Companies, I own a business and we pay taxes. And if I got a tax break, I might do something to expand my show, but probably I would, do more marketing for it. I'm not going to hire another person. I don't need another person right now. So, companies hire people in response to demand. Demand is driven by consumers spending money. So the real job creators are not the people running the companies. They're not the people doing the hiring. It's the people creating the demand that causes the company to say, whoa, we sold 100,000 Twinkies last month, but now we've got, a demand for 200,000 Twinkies. So we need to hire twice as many people on the Twinkie line, or the widget or whatever it may be. Demand is what drives the creation of jobs. And so if you literally if you give people unemployment benefits, if you give people free money, they buy things, and in the course of buying things, they generate demand that will cause employers to hire new people, which is why, which is how Franklin Roosevelt got us out of the Great Depression. And that was at a 91% top tax rate. He raised the top tax rate from 25% to 91%, where it stayed until 1974. The best 3 decades we ever had.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
On Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here
on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Beverly in McHenry, Illinois. Hey, Beverly, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I don't know that much about libertarianism. I hear you guys making great points. I'm more in line with you. But let me ask, their thinking or his thinking is that you're going to be sued like forever and even into your children's things if you do something really bad. So they're mandating that, from the time you're 16, you have to take out like multi-million-dollar insurance policies? Because if you don't have insurance now, a lawyer doesn't usually even want to bother, you know?
Yeah, and also a system that is based entirely on litigation enhances class structures, because poor people will not be able to hire good lawyers. And so if they're the malefactor, if they're the guy who hit his kid, they're more likely to get wiped out. Rich people can hire, fancy top-of-the-line lawyers, and they're more likely to get off or to get a lighter sentence or penalty, number one. And number two, as you correctly point out, it would create a huge market for lawsuit insurance. And once you've got the insurance, then you just say, okay, there's no rules to break. It's just, I might get sued. So as long as I'm insured, I'll be okay. And then the insurance market, now this is where libertarians would probably actually agree with this. They'd say, well, then the insurance companies are going to look at your behavior, and based on your behavior, they're going to decide how to price your insurance. And so a lot of people won't be able to buy insurance against lawsuits because their behavior indicates that they might get sued. But it seems to me like a complete bizarre system that is a jerry-rig of sorts, and that does not deal with preventing harms. It only deals with harm after the fact. It makes no sense to me, frankly, Beverly.
Yeah, makes no sense. Thank you so much, Tom, for the discussion.
You're welcome. Thank you for the call. And one of the reasons I want to continue having these conversations with Charles is because, one of the hottest and fastest growing political movements in the United States among young people is libertarianism. They're reading Ayn Rand's novels. They're embracing Alan Greenspan, and they're thinking, oh yeah, this is the way to do it. We just get rid of government and let except for the court system, and let money determine everything, because money is the great lubricant. Money is the power. Money is the important thing. Well, for a lot of people, money isn't the important thing, and for a lot of people, money isn't available to them. And so, how are you going to sue somebody who has nothing, which is more than half of America? They're basically judgment proof. I mean, there's no point in suing somebody who literally, if they had a $500 expense, could not pay it without a credit card. I mean, what are you going to do? So anyhow, we'll be back with your calls on this and other topics right after.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back with your calls. Stick around.
And welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading an excerpt from Robert Wolfe's book, Original Wisdom, Stories of an Ancient Way of Knowing. I wrote the foreword for it. Robert Wolfe just died just a few months ago, just this last year, in Hawaii. Louise and I visited him there a number of times. He was in his 90s. And back in the 1950s, he was an anthropologist and sociologist who had been hired by the Malaysian government to figure out why this one particular Aboriginal tribe, the Sonoy, who lived deep inside the jungle, hunting-gathering tribe, why they were, quote, lazy, why they were unwilling to work in the rubber plantations. And he got to know them, and he discovered that their view of the world was completely different than ours. And that's essentially what this book is about, and it's absolutely a mind-boggling book. I'll share a little. This is from the middle of the book. This is page 86. It's finally he's reached the point where they'll let him sleep in the village with them. He says, in time, I grew to know them better. But it was when I began to overnight in their villages that I learned that they literally lived in another reality. When it became dark, people huddled together for warmth and companionship. In the tropics, there's no long period of dusk. It grows dark quickly. The air would become cool, and people would move closer together, reaching out, touching a neighbor, perhaps holding hands. Women might run their fingers through the hair of the person sitting next to them. During the nights I stayed over, they would often gather around me and have me ask them questions. Then they would ask me questions, very quietly and softly. Our being together was not like other social situations I'd ever experienced. We talked, but softly. They did not know how to compete for attention. A few words now and then were all that were spoken, a question or a comment, a simple answer, long silences. Sometimes someone would have some tobacco and light a cigarette, a tobacco rolled into a leaf, which was passed around the group. People might ask each other whether they had noticed that particularly bright patch of sunlight on the side of the river behind a certain tree, or if they had noticed that large yellow bird that sang in the morning. Evening was a time of reflection, of gentle communication, of being together. I never knew their blood relationships, but evening times felt like family. As it grew later, one of the people would get up to go into one of the houses, more often little more than lean-tos or rickety huts on stilts, and fall asleep. Eventually, each of us had found an empty spot on the floor of one of the shelters, and wrapped in our sarongs, we huddled close to whoever else slept in that house that night. The houses did not belong to anyone. It seemed that each of the 4 or 5 little shelters was for all the people living in that settlement at that moment. We would fall asleep whenever we chose, and I'm sure with whomever we wanted to spend the night. Yes, people had sex, but even that was gentle, quiet, and discreet. Occasionally, someone might turn over and bump into a couple being a little too acrobatic or noisy, and there would be a grunt. Or people might move away from a couple that made too much to do about their lovemaking. Passionate lovemaking between young people often took place during the day, outside in a more hidden spot in the jungle, I was told. In the morning, we might not all wake up at the same time, but those who woke up early would lay quietly, waiting for more people to awaken. And somehow, as if by magic, we would find ourselves sitting in a circle, rubbing our eyes, stretching the kinks out. One person would say, I saw a bird, a beautiful bird. Someone else would say, yes, I too saw a bird. What kind of bird was it? Another would ask. And so they would create a story with images from our dreams. They did not think that they were sharing dreams as we think of dreams. The Sonoy believed that the world we live in is a shadow world, and that the real world is behind it. At night, they believe, we visit the real world. In the morning, we share what we saw and learned there. The story that was created around the memories that 4 or 5 people brought back from the real world set the tone for that day. Sometimes one of the group would take the lead in soliciting input from each person in the room. How about you? What do you remember? Other times, the story flowed without help. A few times, no story emerged at all. It was very obvious that when a more or less coherent story was created around the images we shared, we who had slept in that shelter would live that story that day. Usually, the stories were simple. A bird had shown the way to a tree that was bearing fruit. Later that day, some of us would find that tree, and of course, it did have ripe fruit. Or the story was about a bad storm, so people would stay close to the shelters all day, and yes, there was a big storm in the late afternoon. Occasionally, the stories were about things that affected all of them, all the people in the settlement, or perhaps even all the Sonoy. In that case, they would make it a point to share with the people who had slept in other shelters as soon as possible. It might take all morning to disseminate that story to everyone. I did not witness any attempts to call a meeting, but it was obvious that when a serious story came out of a morning's dream telling, all the people in the settlement would eventually hear that story. I learned about all of this very early during the time that I spent with the Sonoy. It was in what I thought of as the first village, the first settlement I visited, that an important story emerged from what I brought back from the real world during one of my nights there. It made a big impression on me because part of the story came from my dream. It was a particularly vivid dream about one of my family's dogs, an all-black mongrel that seemed to have come with the house we rented in the suburbs of Kuala Lumpur. We had tried to get rid of that dog. In fact, one of the first days after we moved we had run over to over the poor dog in the driveway, but he would not leave. We tried chasing him away. He kept coming back. So we adopted him and called him Jaga, which is Malay for guard or protector. I do not remember that Jaga was a particularly good watchdog, but he was around. And he goes on to tell his dream, and then it's just an absolutely fascinating story. Original Wisdom, Stories of an Ancient Way of Knowing by Robert Wolfe.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On Twitter, the devil tweets, "My sister was killed in a crosswalk by a driver on his cell phone. I would have far preferred flashing lights at the crosswalk to the lawsuit." Yeah, bingo. Amazing. Well, anyhow, back to your calls. Hauke in Berlin, Germany. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah. I'm the guy who pointed out the thing, how is speeding or how are traffic regulations different from work safety regulations last week.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah. Is Charles still there or is he?
No, he's left. He's left.
Sad. Yeah, I just wanted to make it as an example. Where's the difference? It also can be some defective work equipment that can cause harm, but slip through because the regulations for safety checks or regular service has been removed or something. You pointed out last time with these two buttons and these big knives that can easily slice off a hand and so on. You need regulations to prevent damage. Yeah.
Well, and there's also the issue of, for example, Charles was talking. I mentioned BPA, bisphenol. I forget what the A stands for, but it's a compound that is a hormone disruptor that is illegal in Europe and is now that it's been outed as a disruptive chemical. More and more in the United States, you find things for children that are BPA free, but the fact of the matter is that were it not for government scientists, I believe we would not even know about this. And industry will go out of their way to cover this up. I mean, Charles's kids could grow up, with lots and lots of BPA and end up, with, very, very early breast cancers. And I mean, because, these hormone disruptors tend to cause cancers of the reproductive system, breast cancer, uterine cancer, things like that. They could grow up, have those things, die of them, and he would never even know that an industry that knew that they were selling poison had poisoned him or poisoned his kids, just like my dad didn't know in 1950 when he was working in a Alcoa steel plant in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a cloud of asbestos, that Alcoa and everybody else in the asbestos business knew that it was going to cause mesothelioma. They just knew that it would kill them 20, 30 years down the road. In my dad's case, it was probably more like 50 years down the road. So they just hid it. They just kept it secret. And how do you deal with that? I mean, you can't sue somebody if you don't have the proof, if you don't know. You're sitting around going, gee, why did all three of my kids die of, reproductive system cancers? I don't know. You know,
Yeah,
like,
I know. And even if you can sue and you have a watertight case, we are small people. That is a big corporation. What chance do you have?
Yeah.
They will crush you, or they will drag out the lawsuit years and years and years until you run out of patience or whatever. And I want to say to Charles, even if he can someone sue for $1 trillion and win, it won't bring back the health of your children, brother, mother, whatever.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Okay. Very, very well said. Thank you very much for the call. And you know, a dimension of this, arguably, is also our healthcare debate. And you've got Republicans out there saying, well, you know, having people with pre-existing conditions, there's 113 million of us in the United States with pre-existing conditions. You know, my wife has had cancer. I've had cancer. I've had other diseases. You know, I had pneumonia. I don't know what else. Oh, I had back surgery. So I've got pre-existing condition there. That's pretty much it. But you know, knock wood. But you know, so with pre-existing conditions, you get tossed into these high-risk pools where, in order to buy health insurance, you have to pay $25,000 a year. And Congressman, this is Mo Brooks, isn't it, Chris? This clip, yeah. Congressman Mo Brooks, he's like, well, you know, the Republican philosophy is that you know, if you've lived a good life, you shouldn't have any pre-existing conditions, and so you pay less. And if you haven't lived a good life, then you pay more. Here he is talking about this on MSNBC.
My understanding is that it will allow insurance companies to require people who have higher health care costs to contribute more to the insurance pool that helps offset all these costs, thereby reducing the cost to those people who lead good lives, they're healthy, you know, they've done the things to keep their bodies healthy. And right now, those are the people who've done things the right way that are seeing their costs skyrocketing.
Right. Like those babies born with congenital heart disease, you know, as which comedian was it who just did this whole thing on TV? It was Jimmy Kimmel, wasn't it? Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've read 2 stories about it, but I'm pretty sure it was Jimmy Kimmel. You know, talking about how his daughter was born with a heart defect. You know, what lifestyle choice did she make that you know, the Republicans in Congress want to condemn? A, and B, I would argue, you know, it's like, you know, somebody gets cancer. What you're going to say? Oh, you shouldn't have lived downwind from that oil refinery. You shouldn't have driven on the roads where there's gas fumes. You shouldn't have eaten food that wasn't organic. You should you know, live on a billionaire estate with you know, chefs and organic food. And I mean, it's like, where does it end? Well, here's apparently one of the places where it's ending. This is a rather shocking article in USA Today today by Barbara Marquand in the NerdWallet area. And actually, this might not, yeah, it was USA Today. Several life insurance companies are testing technology that uses facial analytics and other data to estimate life expectancy. Insurers use life expectancy estimates to make policy approval and pricing decisions. You get this? Pretty soon, your insurance company is looking for your selfies or pictures of you. And in fact, they go into the details of this, you know, how this works and all this kind of stuff. And let me find the part where it's talking about exactly how this they're exploring how facial analytics may identify early signs of diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, or dementia. Is developing a feature that will tell whether someone ever smoked. Among the clues are early signs of crow's feet around the eyes and under-eye bagging. Smoking is going to be written on your face, he says. Even if you stop smoking, once it's written, it's there. And so now your insurance company is going to be, what, going through your social media files? Oh, yeah, your insurance is going to cost you $50,000 a year. Amazing. Brian in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to offer a segue from your segment on race and problems with the police. If you haven't read, or your listeners haven't read, "Tears We Cannot Stop" by Michael Eric Dyson.
Oh, it's a brilliant book. I had him here in the studio for an hour. I have read a chapter of his book as our book report. You'll see it from time to time on Free Speech or hear it on the radio. He's a wonderful man, and it's just an astonishing book. Every white person in America, because that's who he wrote it to. In fact, the subtitle is words to that effect. "Tears We Cannot Stop" by Michael Eric Dyson. But back to you, Brian. Pardon my interruption.
Well, I'm so thankful that you picked up on that, Tom, because I completely agree with what you just said. The original reason for my call was that I think what people keep missing about why Trump is so popular with his base, and it's such a formidable candidate, is that his number one asset is he's strong. He's strength, and
he's an authoritarian, and according to John Dean, about 20% of Americans are authoritarian followers, and a very small percentage are authoritarian leaders. Trump is one of them, and they bond with each other very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when I listen to you doing your 10-second poll of people, this is, I think, something that Democrats need to take into account. I mean, we don't need to nominate an authoritarian, but we do need to nominate somebody who has the strength to stand up to Trump. So that's why I'm still supporting Bernie Sanders. I would think it would be great if he just ran or, served one term and had like Elizabeth Warren as his vice president, so she could get the cred that you get from being vice president.
Why not just put her at the top of the ticket?
Well, because I think in this misogynistic society, women, if they push back too hard,
Brian, respectfully, I acknowledge misogyny, absolutely, and it's as bad as racism in this country. But Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. It's just that her campaign was so incompetent in their strategy that they ignored the 3 or 4 states where she lost just by a whisker, but didn't even bother to go to those states at the end. I mean, that was a decision that was made by Robbie Mook, John Podesta, and these guys, and it was a stupid decision. But I think we've already demonstrated that a woman can easily get elected president of the United States. As I said, Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. So they just weren't in the right places, because of this vestige of the. So I'm all, we'll see what Bernie wants to do. But I think that, Elizabeth Warren is a Democrat in the party. And she knows how to take names and kick ass too. So we'll see. We'll see. Brian, thanks for the call. I'm sorry we're hitting a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Welcome back. Denise, watching Free Speech TV in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Denise, what's on your mind today?
Well, you're talking about all these regulations, and safety regulations, or the lack of them, killed my grandfather in 1966 in Calumet in the copper mines. And my dad was on the bargaining committee, and they weren't fighting for better wages. They were fighting for safer mines. And Calumet and Hecla, the name of the company, they pulled out rather than do the safety.
Wow.
Now, who is going to sue anybody when a rock the size of a refrigerator falls on your grandfather?
Right. And particularly if the company decides to declare bankruptcy, as so many of, for example, so many of the mining companies in West Virginia have done.
Yeah, it was horrible up here. I mean, they were sending people. My dad was getting threats. We had to stay away from the windows because he was on the bargaining committee.
Wow.
And this was in the 60s. I was like 11, and they want to do away with safety regulations. They just want, this Trump thing wants to just cut everything, and it's like we have to fight for everything we've ever had. It's so sad.
That is, yeah, I agree, Denise. But we've got to do it. I mean, it's like, the libertarian billionaires are trying to take over our country, and we cannot let them do it. Denise, thank you for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. Julia, watching Free Speech in Warner Springs, California. Hey, Julia, what's up?
Yes, hi, thank you. Well, I'm a retired educator and psychotherapist, and I have to take issue with the term strongman when it's applied to murderous dictators, because clearly they have their minions doing their dirty work, and they are not strong. There's a branch of behavioral science called neuro-linguistic programming, and you have to pay attention to words because words are powerful, very powerful. Words influence thinking, which influences emotion, which influences behavior, and it's a chain reaction. So I just want to leave with the thought that might does not make right. Right makes might. And we need to stop referring to these people that Donald Trump emulates as strong. This is not strength. This is not the true meaning of strength.
Sometimes, though, words, I don't disagree with anything you've said. That said, though, there are some phrases that are clearly, intentionally, and understood to be either ironic or pejorative. And strongman is definitely one of those.
To be that. However, some people take them literally and believe it. I just heard a caller, a few callers back, talking about how we need someone like Donald Trump to be strong and stand up for the Democrats. That's not strength, and that doesn't exhibit power. It's the wrong kind of influence, and folks that follow those people are being misled.
I think I don't disagree with that point, but I think that what he was trying to say is that Donald Trump is charismatic, and he is. He gets people to follow him. He gets people,
Well, he's a showman. He's a showman.
In my point.
If he puts on a good...
And you've got to, if you're going to have somebody running for president against him, they've got to be as good as he is at that, at the very least.
He's on the stage, and if you want to, get some yucks out of that, then that's too bad. But
it's not yucks. I mean, Bernie Sanders is a showman too, and a damn good one. And that's, instead of, somebody who's just kind of mild-mannered, a Tim Kaine type, I think you need a real, we really need somebody who will push back. And frankly, I think Elizabeth Warren is that person. Julia, I thank you for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Benita in South Haven, Michigan. Hey, Benita, what's up? Benita, listening on Sirius? Apparently not there. Okay, let's try Alan in Windsor, Connecticut. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind?
Oh, I got a couple possible fixes for you. I love your show. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. Number one, we need to go to a popular vote elections only. We need to fix all the voting machines in this country where we can get a paper ballot tally. We need independent parties now, like you say, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. But my main item is we need to invoke binding initiative and referendum to impeach Donald Trump. He feels he can do no wrong, and he feels he is always right. He's a spoiled brat who will never apologize or admit he's wrong.
What would the basis of your impeachment, articles of impeachment be, Alan?
He's a big liar, that's what. He lied to the American public. He's only representing less than 50% of the American public.
Therefore, I think it's less than 5%, less than 2% of the American public.
That's my point. He lied to the people. He's even reverting the lies that he told the people that voted for him. And now they're getting frustrated with him. And we're left in a position where we supposedly can't do anything. Invoke binding initiative and referendum. Let the people vote whether he should be impeached or not, whether he's representing us correctly or not.
I got it. Unfortunately, the Constitution has no provision to allow for that, but I share your sentiment. Alan, thanks for the call. David in Auburn, California. Hey, David, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
Awesome. I had a question, and I wondered if you had ever seen. There's a cover of The Economist from, I believe, January 1988, and at the top of the title page it says "Get ready for a global world currency," and the imagery on it is just pretty interesting. It has basically like a phoenix eagle with a bunch of currency in flames at its feet, and then it has a big medallion on its chest, and it says the year 2018 on it.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, this is in 1988. Do you know what year the Eurozone was ratified and put into effect, the euro?
I do not know off the top of my head, no.
It must have been right around that time. I mean, I lived in Germany in 86, 87, and I'm pretty sure, at that time it was still the Deutschmark. 1999? Okay. 1992. Okay, Troy just looked it up. It was 92. Okay, anyhow, back to you, David.
It's kind of in context of your book, about 2016 and the crash.
Right.
And obviously Trump, promising the sun to this new economy, and, if he gets impeached or, the Democrats can somehow, go against his economic agenda, would that cause the stock market to potentially go down again, and the dollar would fail, and we would need a new currency, essentially?
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think the United States is ever going to abandon the dollar, and it's one of the strongest currencies in the world. The question, and the one that could shake the world economy, is the euro. It's the fate of the euro, because it was the whole EU thing, or the Eurozone rather, those countries that just used the euro, was very badly put together. It was put together using a lot of economic assumptions coming out of the Chicago School that were basically austerity assumptions, and the poorer countries of Europe, or the middle poorer countries of Europe, Italy, Spain, Greece, Portugal, Ireland, are paying the price for it. And they really, really need to renegotiate that Eurozone agreement so that countries can do deficit spending to get themselves out of economic crises. David, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Jeremy in Woodland, California. Hey, Jeremy, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Donald Trump is a carnival barker, and our electorate needs to be able to determine the difference between a carnival barker and somebody who really understands and knows what they're doing. Hillary kicked his butt 3 debates in a row. Let's give her some credit.
Oh, I am. And in fact, I keep pointing out, she got 3 million more votes than him. She didn't become president because, in my opinion, because of bad strategy in the upper Midwest. But, which was, I don't blame it her. I don't lay that at her feet. She ran, she ran a strong campaign, and she was a strong candidate. Absolutely. Jeremy, thanks for the call. Stephanie in Alexandria, Virginia. We got 1 minute left. Stephanie, it's yours.
Hi. I want to thank you for pinning the tail on the donkey with respect to strategy being an issue in the Clinton loss of the campaign. And I wanted to say, with respect to the Comey hearings, I was listening to them a bit, but I had a really hard time listening to the line of questioning of some of the Democratic Congress people, because I just really feel like there's all this focus on Russia, and WikiLeaks as being a causative factor in the election. Now, let me be clear that we can't allow foreign countries to try to influence the outcome of our elections. But the fact that we are solely focused on that and not focused on how the Democratic National Committee was not doing what it needed to be doing to have impartial primaries concerns me a great deal. It's like an attempt to change the conversation and cover up. They've given no coverage to the DNC lawsuit and the disclosure from that the DNC basically said they could handpick the candidate in a back room.
I'm with you, Stephanie. And nobody's talking about, Robbie Mook running a terrible campaign, strategically speaking. But yes, and we need to have a 9/11 style commission to look into whether Russia had any involvement in our election, and if so, what it was. We need to nail that down. That thing is out there. I would think that the Russians would want it as much as anybody else would. I certainly want it. We need to know what happened. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.